All right, y'all. Welcome to another edition of All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics Are Local. We've got a real impactful show tonight. We're gonna have some really good conversation based around a couple of things I'm really interested in talking about, and obviously I want to talk a little. Um, and hopefully, uh, talk about some of what's going on with some of the players who, um, don't really get the shine that they should, or even get the financial services. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, hopefully, with our guests and get filled in on that. So, Donna, why don't you start off? Tell us what the rundown is. What's coming up at 6:30, and then Zaid, you can pick up from there, and then we'll talk about what's going on. We'll start introducing our guests.
Okay, we have Giles Ship who's coming up at 6 o'clock at the top of the hour. Giles is the president of Noble, and he's also, I see that he's serving as a commissioner, but he's a career police um, officer, and he served in many capacities. He's I will let him. I can't. His resume is very extensive. So when he comes on, I'm going to allow him to introduce himself. But one of the reasons that we brought him on today, um, if we remember, Assemblywoman Timberlake put forth legislation to say that if anybody who is armed by a police officer and they are harmed or they are fatally killed, that they have to have
Anyone
an
who dies
independent
in police custody.
prosecutor assigned to the case. Um, and while there were many people in the community who supported it, Giles is unique because again he's a police officer, and his organization came to the table and said this is good, measure, that there's nothing, if we're doing our job, that we should fear in supporting this. And he stood right beside her and said, we need this, and we need to let this legislation go forward. So he'll be here so that we can, as somebody who was at the table from the beginning, talk to him about that, and especially from his perspective as a police officer. And then following that, we have Bobby Brainard Brown coming on, who is a former police officer. I'm sorry, got the police officer. He's a former NFL player, and currently he is an attorney and a sports agent. And he will come and speak to us about being an NFL player and then being on the other side of the table representing NFL players. And the most recent, why the NFL is in um, the limelight right now is because of DeMar and how he fell out and had a heart attack, cardiac arrest on the field. And we know that there has always been criticism about football and how dangerous it is. So we're going to hear from Mr. Brown and explain as a player the possible danger and how it's evolved. I know there's been a lot of changes in the NFL, and now that he represents NFL players, what are some of the changes now?
Right? And that's coming up at 6:30, right?
Yes.
Yep. And then, of course, at 7 o'clock, we're going to have the folks with the vote coming up, and we'll have Conrad coming up first, and then we'll have Monifa Bandelli coming up second. So Conrad Tillett first, and then, of course, we'll be talking with Monifa Bandelli, and we'll see what their views are going on, what their views are going into 2023 politically, and talk with them about some of the things happening in the community as well. So that's coming up at 7. And then we have something coming up at 8, right, Brother Zaid?
Actually, they're gonna come on a little earlier. They're supposed to come on
Oh,
more like 7:30.
who's
Mountain
coming at 7:30?
Lawrence Hamm and Forrest Pritchett, and Forrest Pritchett's bringing on some of his MLK scholars from Seton Hall. So the outline is the time is a little different. It's been modified since he put it out earlier in the day. So they're actually going to come out more like 7:30, 7:45. This coming weekend is the birth anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's hard to believe it's going to be his 94th birth anniversary. It's hard to, we can't even imagine Dr. King being an elder because we lost him at only 39. But his legacy and his call for a beloved community is as important and as timely as it has ever been. And our guests are involved in uplifting the legacy of Dr. King in very powerful and committed and enduring ways. So Lawrence Hamm, who's the founding chair of the People's Organization for Progress, who has an annual march every year on Dr. King's birthday. This year it'll be on Sunday the 15th at 2 p.m. from the MLK Memorial Monument, right? And the MLK Scholars Program is a long-standing scholars program that an elder theologian has been training young scholars in theology, particularly grounded in the legacy of Dr. King's scholarship. Dr. King wrote 6 books. A lot of folks don't realize that. He'll have some of those. The great Forrest Pritchett will have us have some of his students on with him to lift that up. And of course, when they were with us, some of them were also with us just a few weeks ago around the challenge of losing Professor Harris, right? So that's going to be a very loaded conversation when they come back to us in that last hour. And of course, DJ Rhino will give us his hip hop rundown as he always does every week at the end of the night.
Yep. And so our guest is joined in. So we want to welcome my brother to the show.
Hi, Jiles. How are you?
I'm well. Doing good. How about yourself?
Good. Do you know Bobby Brown?
Sure, I know Bobby Brown.
I know he's your frat brother.
Yes,
And
he is.
when the Super Bowl was hosted in at Giant Stadium,
Mhm.
Bobby Brown at the breakfast, he did an introduction, and I never forget, he said, never let anybody introduce yourself better than you can introduce yourself. And were you at that breakfast?
I wasn't. That was too cold for me. Yeah.
No, it was inside. We was at the Robert Treat.
Yeah, they had all that heat coming down.
Yeah, but I never forget, and it was interesting because he came up at the end and he did a beautiful introduction of himself. And I just said that because I looked over your bio. I was like, he did this, he did that. And, at the top, you're a commissioner. And can you tell just real briefly, just a little bit? And then I started with the top. You are a commissioner and you're also the president of Noble. But just tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. And this is just for the sake of conversation and to give people a perspective of my viewpoint. I am currently the president of New Jersey Noble, formerly the national president of Noble, international president of Noble. And Noble is an acronym for the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executive. We're an organization of 55 current chapters now throughout the United States, the Caribbean, and the UK. We also represent federal, state, county, and municipal law enforcement executives. What do I mean by that? Folks that are special agent in charge, FBI, every rank above that, you have to be GS-13 or higher to be a regular member. Also, chiefs of police, sheriffs, people from executives in the Department of Corrections, and right through every law enforcement college and university police, right through every gun-toting law enforcement agency that there is. We also have associate member level of membership. Those that are rank and file members who we mentor to become executives in law enforcement. Another 2 categories we have are 1, supporting member. That's for those members of the community who support the mission and the goals of the organization, and as well as sustaining members, which are generally corporate partners. Also, I've served as the director of public safety for the city of Plainfield, overseeing the law enforcement arm, the police department, fire department, and the Office of Emergency Management. I started my law enforcement career with the Edison Police Department, which is the 5th largest municipality in the state of New Jersey. And I've served on in a number of different capacities there, as an instructor at the police academy, patrol ranks for various different capacities in patrol division for 17 years. And also upon the request, I came down and worked for 8 years with the New Jersey Attorney General's Office, Division of Criminal Justice, and oversaw several investigative units there, and also served as a liaison for the members of the community and mostly challenged communities. So that's a thumbnail sketch. But I think what's important for this conversation also, I was selected by the Department of Justice to go out with four other law enforcement leaders, chiefs of police from other law enforcement agencies, university in Connecticut, North Carolina, Sacramento, and as well as some other folks who were from the cops office, to do a review of the St. Louis County Police Department after they appeared at a rally with military style equipment during the Mike Brown shooting. So just wanted to, I'll let it go right there and we can get into the subject matter. But just to give everyone a perspective of my over 35 years of experience in law enforcement. And as you said, I currently serve as commissioner with the New Jersey Police Training Commission.
And just to get right in, Giles, the legislation that Assemblywoman Timberlake put forth regarding the independent prosecutor, you were in support of this legislation. And just to be real quick, there has been a couple of incidents where this legislation should have been applied to, and it doesn't seem like it's being enforced the way it's supposed to. Are you paying attention to that? And do you know why it's not being properly enforced?
Yeah, well, first of all, we had to fight hard to get it in place. And what you're referring to, specifically the independent prosecutors legislation that mandated the New Jersey Attorney General's office to investigate any crime or any death that was either in police custody or caused by a police action. So that particular legislation, the intent of that legislation was to make that investigation more independent. What do I mean by that? To take the eyes of the Attorney General's office and to take that out of the hands of the local prosecutor or the county prosecutors and have the Attorney General's office take over that case. Why is that so important? That's important because we all know that local police, and me serving in the local police capacity for over 17 years, I know we have an incestuous relationship with the prosecutors. They rely on us to make their cases. So, when, whether it is real or perceived, in order to maintain trust in law enforcement, which is essential for us to do our jobs in the most fair and effective way, what we don't want to happen is the community to question whether we are moving forward with honesty and integrity. So we thought that let's put this independent group over these type of incidents. It makes sense to all of us. But of course, you had pushback from the police unions, like you do with anything else. And then prosecutors didn't want to let go because of, that's their fiefdom. But we thought it would be better if the Attorney General or independent group looked at those particular incidents for the reasons that I stated earlier. So that is the gist of it, and that's the reason why we wanted to, move forward, and we supported and not only Assemblywoman Timberlake, but the other conscious legislators who wanted to move this legislation forward. Because if we're doing the right thing, we feel as an organization, a unique thing about our organization, we are not only of the community, and most of the situations at hand impact people that look like us, but most of us grew up in the community. Most of us still have family members in the community. And who can speak to this this topic in my opinion, better than us.
So, did you have a question, Ed?
Well, I would like to.
And Ed, I'm sorry.
If I
Saeed
could
said
add one
no.
more thing, if I
Okay,
could
go
add
ahead.
one more thing now, just so we're clear, the Attorney General's office in New Jersey, the Attorney General is the most powerful Attorney General in the United States. The Attorney General had previously in the law, they had the right to do this. They can go over and take over any police department. They can take over any investigation if they want to. All right. So what we did in the law, it used to say they may. We changed the word for may to you will. So now it's not allowed for them to actually, you know, make a decision on that. Now it's mandated by law that you have to take over that case now. So I just want to be clear with that.
That's right. That's exactly
Okay,
right.
and prior to the previous Attorney General leaving office, when the law was signed into law, when the legislation was signed into law, sorry for the background. We understand that the Attorney General was like, it's business as usual.
Well,
With him saying something like that, does that,
yeah, what you have to realize, I mean, nobody is naive enough to believe that we don't have problems in this system that are systemic problems, and so it's a fraternity, and for all let's just keep it real, it's fraternity, and prosecutors are also collegiate. All right, he's a former prosecutor, so for him to say that we're going to do business as usual, that's one of the inherent problems in our system. And that's when it goes specifically to the reason why we wanted to take that out of county prosecutors' hand. And again, some county prosecutors do the right thing. You had a situation in Essex County, where a young man was traveling down the parkway. Some officers pulled him over, and over a domestic violence situation. We're not the judges. We're not the arbitrators of the facts. Our job is to, we have probable cause, effect an arrest, and turn it over to the judicial system. So this particular individual, fortunately for another, fortunately for the young man, another police officer's car pulled up that had a camera in it, and it videotaped what was happening. And so subsequently, these officers, I believe they were from Bloomfield, they got charged and they were criminally prosecuted. But had it not been for that camera, that prosecutor's office, one, wouldn't have had the information. And again, it was a prosecutor's office that had people in there who understood what it's like to look like us and be involved in this system, and they did the right thing. So I'm not saying that to say that all prosecutors or all cops, for that matter, will take the law into their own hands, but here's a way for us to safeguard that question from even arising in people's conscience with respect to is this the truth? Are these people moving forward with integrity or not? I mean, and that's still not an absolute, but it should give us a higher probability. The people in the Attorney General's office are not involved in police unions, and they serve at the pleasure of. So you don't have a guaranteed job for life there. So that's probably the most independent body we have in this state.
Giles,
and okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah.
Giles, first of all, I'm very glad to have you on. We've crossed paths very passingly in the last several years.
Yes.
Last time we actually crossed paths was when I had to have about dozens of folks testify on behalf of the Civilian Review Board that was before a committee hearing in the Assembly. And I'm glad that you were there and testimony mattered. We can see that from somewhere. I want to ask you the question that Donna raised comes up in the context of several cases that we've been looking at recently. One, we have a case. Now, I know you can't really comment on the case itself, but what we're really trying to get at is looking at what we can do to strengthen the independent prosecutors bill, meaning that to the degree that it's in place, it needs elements of transparency, right, in its process. We had a case recently in Asbury Park with Hassani Best, who was killed in a mental health crisis by an officer who knew him in a situation that had been contained and that had additional help, more equipped to address somebody in a mental health crisis, and it put a real bad taste in a whole lot of folks' mouths throughout the state. We have a case locally here in Newark where a young man was killed on New Year's Day, and both of these cases were also on videotape, right? And the family of the victim has not heard anything at all from the Attorney General's office in terms of where that case is. Then at the same time, you once in a while you get a little something that'll let them know that they're at least still there. They did prosecute a police officer who was involved in the beating of someone who was breathing for his life in Trenton. And there was some modest communication with the Gulia Dale family. Major Dale was killed on the 4th of July in Newton, New Jersey. But there's seems to be some, at best, and I'm trying to be modest about it, inconsistency in how that new bill is being managed, right, in the eyes of the public in its process. So the question that we're trying to now bring forward to him, to the governor, to the state, to the community is how can this bill that was long overdue, that not only puts the ball in the Attorney General's office lap, but it also, puts that added responsibility that you just described on. And when something happens, you got to go to work. So something happens, you got to go to work. It's not an option anymore; it's a requirement. So, what can you say about that? And I want to ask you a follow-up question that's really important to how we organize. You muted, Jiles. There you go.
Yeah, one of the best models that I've seen as I travel, and I said we have chapters throughout the United States with Noble, is in New York, their Attorney General's office. They actually implemented a process where the first officers on the scene secure the scene. They actually bring the Attorney General's office out, and we used to respond for all police shootings. So, but they bring them out and they secure the scene. They still work with the local officers who have relationships in the neighborhood and the prosecutor's offices, but they take over the crime. They take over the crime scene after that, and they do the thorough investigation. Currently, what's happening now, what they're doing from the Attorney General's office, they're overseeing, quote unquote, the investigation. They oversee it. So they're still relying on the prosecutors to do it. So really, the intent of the law has not been fully implemented. It's not been fully implemented.
That's what we're getting at. Thank you.
And we have to, quite frankly, and it's not like just one thing that can be done. We have to do things at a couple of levels. We have to have more activism from the community. When we're having these hearings or these different meetings with the Attorney General office and actual legislative hearings, we need to be in those rooms. We need to be in those rooms. It's a squeaky wheel that gets the oil. Number one. Number two, we also have to look at a model that's working. I know some people in the New York Attorney General's office. I can't tell you how successful that model has been, but I can tell you it's a model that brings all the elements to the table that we need to make judicious decisions from an independent body, more independent body. So that's just two things right now, and I think we can do in the beginning. So when we go into these particular meetings with these individuals, people will like to come up with reasons why they can't do something if they really don't want to do it. And I'm just going to keep it real.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, we have to, and we as law enforcement executives, I'm not just speaking from an African American perspective. I'm speaking from a perspective that my job as a director or as a chief of a law enforcement agency, my number one priority is this public safety of the community members that we serve. And for us to do our jobs in the most efficient and effective way, we have to have the community's trust. We cannot be looked at as a illegitimate entity. And so for those reasons, just as much as for the reasons that everybody should be treated fairly with the administration of justice, is the reason why we support that type of policing.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Right on. Now, let me ask you this, and have fun with this if you can. There are too few of you. Right? What do I mean? We need, not only do we need to be in the room, we also need, when we have this, we've got a crazy situation in Englewood, New Jersey, right? Very prominent, opulent suburb, right? Racially divided as all heck, down to its police department, right? The need to have voices from within the ranks of law enforcement. Usually, and the head of the fraternal order police should not have been the only police officers that testified with us. And we had almost 90 people testify that day, right? When we had that hearing in the assembly for the CCRB bill. And I can think of you, I think of my good friend Richie Rivera, right? But there are very few Black and Latin law enforcement voices like you that need to be in these conversations. Well, what can we do, right, to increase the number of Jiles ships? All right.
Well, you know what?
Feed them.
Yeah. Well, you know what we have to do as residents or as citizens. We have to demand who's going to be serving us. Many times we are not included in the process. I'm not naive enough to believe that I got to be a police officer in my first police department just because I did well on a test, or just because I did well on a physical agility test.
Come on,
you know,
that's right. Come on.
The members of the community got together and said, we want Jiles Shipp on our police department. We know him, we trust him. You know, right now we leave it up to that law enforcement authority to pick people who are going to police us. We have to change that dynamic. We need to be at that table when the selection processes are being made. You know, and that's not, in too many cases that's not happening. We allow people to select us. Other people bring forward people that they want to represent them. If you know what I mean.
But Giles, but here's what you can also say, that you joined the police force, but then you also went to college, grew up, you got in professional organizations, one being your Greek organization. Your Greek organization took a very personal interest in, and you started training people to prepare for the police exam. So you went back and then you prepared people to be police. So you did more than just become a police. You came back to the table and show other people how to become police officers in the community as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. But oftentimes people like me are dismissed from the process. That's okay, right. For extraneous reasons. All right. Right. Like I said, it's a fraternity. Law enforcement is a fraternity, you know. And sometimes if you don't fit into that square box, you know. But me, fortunately, you know, I grew up in an underserved community in a public housing project. I had, you know, great mentors, and my mother made sure that I know who I was. You know, and quite frankly, you know, I'm never going to forget from whence I came. So I have to, I'm not doing this out of luxury. I consider it an obligation to reach back and bring other people along, because there before the grace of God go I. All right. So, I mean, look, you're not going to find a lot of people, unfortunately, nowadays with that same spirit, but the ones that we have who will put their neck on the line, so to speak, we got to be there to support them, you know, because the jobs have become very lucrative positions now, quite frankly. Right. And my old department, a sergeant in Edison PD, is making now $218,000, you know. And look, don't get me wrong, I ain't mad at them, all right? But at the same time, you know, we have to make sure that we have people who are culturally competent serving in these positions. And we need to be at the table when, when those discussions and those selection processes are being had. Every town, the mayor gets to appoint the chief of police. All right. And that chief of police should be vetted by members in the community, not just by other people. And if that's not who you want as your chief of police, because he has a lot of power in determining, in most cases, the hiring authority or the police director or the hiring authority in most police departments.
And the culture of the behavior.
Correct. They set the tone at the top. They set the tone. And trust me, people want to get promoted. And if they don't, you know what? There's ways of removing them too. So we have to get more involved in the process in order to get the kind of outcomes that we want. This is not a spectator sport.
Not at all.
So I don't know if that somewhat answers your question, but I know myself personally, it's an obligation. And there's other people out there like me too. But what we also have to do is when people go out there on the limb, it makes your life much more difficult. It makes it, your job much more difficult. Some people won't even back you up. I had people who wouldn't even back me up. And the first African American who was hired on my first police department told me, never get yourself into a situation you can't get yourself out of. So it takes courage and commitment, but at the end of the day, when we get somebody that goes out there and put their neck or their life on the line for that matter, the community has to step up and support them as well. And we have to make sure that the elected body and the legislative body also supports them.
Let me ask
you. Ed, did you get a chance? I'm sorry. No, Ed has a question.
And we can follow up with this after, because I know we have another guest coming on. Are you familiar with the program called Trauma to Trust by Equal Justice USA? And if you're not, it's a conversation I want to have with you, because it can be a tool in the repair of the police community relationship that is having its effect to a degree here in Newark.
Right, I know I'm not, but I would love to hear more about it. And one of the other things I want to also say is the reason why so many people, I'm a former Marine. As I said, I grew up in the projects. I'm a Mason, a Q, a Shriner, you name it. I've been through it. I tell people, bring it on. It's going to be what it's going to be. That's just the way I'm made. But a lot of other people are concerned about, if you start standing up for somebody, now your department comes on you and trump up some charges, and then they suspend you. Now you're out of work. You got a family to feed. You got children. You have a home you want to keep, and then you're out of work for maybe 3 or 4 years waiting for your case to come before the courts. We got to expedite that process. Right. It should. If we can arrest, convict, and put somebody in prison for homicide within a year, you mean to tell me if a person was trying to do the right thing, their case will take 4 years before it comes up? And after 3 years, you lose your certification. You can't even be a police officer again. So, we have to look at that also, because there's a lot of people who want to step up, but the reality is that, who still controls the process? And, so, and I'm not making excuses. Sometimes, I have the courage of conviction, but everybody ain't built that way. That's just a reality.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Now we got a couple of more questions, but I want to know: am I breaking any rules by having 2 Qs on a panel at one time?
Not on Deltaversary. I'll be January 13th of the Delta. So what's going on, my brother Jiles?
All right, bro. How you doing?
Man, so good to see you, man. He's been an inspiration to me as well. So it's good to see him.
Same here. Hey, by the way, Donna, we go. I remember brother Bobby when he was in law school.
Wow.
Before we go back, before he became the celebrity that he is today.
Wait, let me just see before John. Ed, did you have a question? And we can't hear you, Ed.
You muted, Ed.
Well, yeah, I did. I think what I wanted to ask Brother Ship was, one of the things he had continued to say was that the community needed to be involved in the selection process. How do we do that? Because, that has been an ongoing issue in the Black community since I've been a young man, in terms of, having some sort of say-so with the the selection process of the police. So how do we do that? I mean, as you know, there's a lot of pushback with mayors, particularly our mayor, in terms of Newark trying to create a police review board. So how does that happen if we still know that all of these issues exist with the police department? How do we do that?
All right, so that doesn't have any bearing on the bargaining agreements. When it's a bargaining agreement, then unions can take a position, but the selection process is up to your council and your mayor for that matter. Now there's criterias that are covered under Title 40, and we can get into it a little bit more. We don't have the time right now, but but the selection process is up to basically the mayor and the council. We in Edison, predominantly a suburban community, we used to have people from the Little League. We used to have people from various different groups, the Boy Scouts and Chamber of Commerce and other groups, sit on the interview panel and determine if this person is a servant individual or not, because that's we tend to forget that law enforcement law enforcement officers are public servants. All right. So, and I can tell you, a person's past in a lot of cases is a predictor of their future. So if this person has not been civically minded, going up, they have not been involved in community service organizations, what make you think when you put that badge on them, all of a sudden they're going to turn over to be something else? It could happen, but I mean, as I said, your past is a predictor of your future in most cases. Not saying the person can't change, but you can be at that table if the council and the mayor says this is the way I want my interview process to go.
Jiles, look like we're gonna have to have you back. And we have looks like we lost Ed, so I hope he was able to hear that. But we have a question. This is a hip hop political show. And we have a question that we ask all our guests. And that question is, what hip hop artist, individual or group, do you listen to when you're looking to be inspired? And can you answer that? And if you have any closing statements as well.
Well, you know what? I listen to all, because I'm that type of open-minded person, and I pull something from everyone. But Chuck D is my guy. If you're asking for my favorite, it's Chuck D.
Right.
And he on all the politics for local. Right? Chuck D is the favorite of the national leader of Noble, Jiles Ship, right up.
And Jiles, you have your brother. You have to go. Did you hear the answer, Ed, that he gave in terms of your question?
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay. So, Jiles, by all means, you're welcome to stay as we go into this conversation with Bobby, your brother. And we understand that you have a schedule, and if you have to go, we understand as well.
Yeah, I do unfortunately have to run, but I'm leaving you guys in great hands with Brother Bobby Brown. He's gonna very knowledgeable brother, and I'm sure you'll be well taken care of. But I want to say also, just thank you for having me, and let's not make this just a discussion. Let's take away from this and develop some action items. We can move forward on.
Absolutely, I'm going to reach out to you.
Okay, great.
And Jiles, remember that you don't always have to wait for us to call you. If you feel as though there's something that you need to get out in the community, please, by all means, just give us a call, and you have a place, to get that word out.
Fantastic. Again, thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, my brother. All right.
Good seeing you, Fred.
Take care.
Bobby, when the show opened, I asked Giles, was he at the breakfast when the Super Bowl was hosted in New York, New Jersey, and I told him how you came up on the stage and you did a speech and it was your introduction, and you said, "Don't let anybody." I remember you close it and introduce you better than you can introduce yourself. Uh, and he said it was too cold that weekend, so he didn't come out.
Yeah.
So with that being said, could you tell us a little bit about Bobby Brainard Brown?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, first and foremost, and to hear Brother Giles and his response to the last question from my brother Ed. Do I say Edward or Ed? I want to be
Ed,
appropriate here.
that's cool.
Ed,
Yeah.
great question. And I'll just say his answer reminded me back in 2000 and let's call it 2005 when I was a summer associate here, aspiring attorney and doing an internship. That brother rolled out the red carpet for me. And, we say rolled out the purple carpet, but rolled out a very welcoming carpet for me and introduced me to New Jersey. I'm from South Florida, born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. Mother was an educator, raised me as a single mother, me along with 4 siblings. I was fortunate enough to do very well academically, but was more prominent as an athlete. And so I got a scholarship to go to the University of Notre Dame, where I was able to play football and run track. And while breaking records there in both football and track, the thing that I am most proud of and the thing that my mother was most proud of is that I was able to graduate with a triple major and a minor. And that was really because of just the dedication and the sacrifices that she made on my behalf and my siblings' behalf. And so when you have all of those sacrifices being made for you by a woman who was 5 foot tall, I stand at 6'3", but she gave me anything and everything that she had to provide for me. And so someone like a Giles Ship that rolls out the carpet for me and welcomes me to a place in New Jersey, which, to be frank, I had never been before. I was a summer intern here. It's just phenomenal. And I stand on the shoulders of the people before me. And that opportunity being at Notre Dame and then playing after Notre Dame in the NFL for both the Green Bay Packers and the Cleveland Browns. And then from there, going back to Notre Dame for law school and then meeting someone like a Giles Ship and being welcomed here in New Jersey has been a blessing for me. I then went on to go to business school at Yale, and I've worked in finance. I've worked in law. I'm at the intersection of both of them now. I'm an elected official in South Orange. But most importantly, I'm a proud guest of the show. So I appreciate you welcoming me here today. Looking forward to getting into some riveting conversations. But to see a face like Giles Ship and be reminded of someone who welcomed me into this state was a very pleasant surprise. So you have the right guest in the building in terms of Mr. Giles Ship, man. He's an amazing man. And so it was good to see his face, but also good to be here with you all.
Well, thank you. And Bobby, we brought you in today to kind of, hone in on your experience with the NFL, one as a player, two, you've started representing the players.
Yes.
And we see a couple of weeks ago, this young man who's playing a great game of football gets hit and stands up and falls back down. Now, that day, was a lot of questions came up. The questions came back about the sport. Is it too harsh of a sport? Is the NFL protecting the players? And so many more questions.
Right.
And then there's a young man that falls out cardiac. You think that's something that would happen to perhaps a person of more wisdom in terms of age, but it happens to a young athletic person who takes care of themselves. And we just want to have questions about how normal is this, number one, and number two, I know there were changes in terms of the NFL and around the concussion issue, but when it comes to the health of the players, is that question always at the table about the players' health being in the forefront?
Very fair. And again, I started off my introduction talking about the sacrifices that my mother made, but for every mother, for every father, for every big brother, for every big sister, little brother, little sister, aunt, uncle, whomever it may be that has a family member out there on that field, the inherent risk of the injuries, and to see a young man at the right young age of 24 in the second year of his NFL career have a cardiac arrest moment right there on the field was nothing less than earth shattering, because we all just by default, right? It's just natural, immediately envision our family member being the person that they are, performing CPR on the field. And that is the challenge with a sport that is so dangerous. Now, this particular event, the cardiac arrest event, in terms of probability, it is so rare that some would like to just get past the moment and say, "Ha, man, that'll never happen again." But the truth of the matter is it happened once; it could happen again. And the exact millisecond in which the contact happened, and exact spot that the contact had to happen for that particular event to occur, while being improbable, it occurred. And not only did it occurred on Monday Night Football with two of the hottest teams in the NFL, with a lot at stake, with a lot of eyes watching, and with a lot of uncertainty. And I think the way my belief is set up, and I'll just say it here, not to evangelize whatsoever, but the way my beliefs are set up is I say that God intended that to happen for us all to see it and just understand just how risky the game is. Mm-hmm. And that same God made sure that there was a medical professional there to preserve this young man's life. And I think while in terms of a health situation, it's going to be a happy ending. He's going to live on. The fact that America got to see just how dangerous the game is says to me, and again, I'm going to put it on my belief system, that God wanted us to make sure to protect the players more. That same multi-billion-dollar corporation that is the NFL, that was in receipt of several advertising dollars in that moment for the Monday Night Football game, that had an amazing viewership in terms of numbers and made sure that America was on the edge of their seat to watch two of the hottest teams in the AFC fight to be the number one team in the AFC, had to look itself in the mirror. And the ugly, ugly truth of the matter is that this is a dangerous game, and the NFL, despite all of the money and the revenue that it makes, continues to be, I would say, I like to say selfish, but we'll just say inequitable when it comes to spreading that wealth and protecting its players. It's the most dangerous game, I would say. Most dangerous game, but it does not have guaranteed contracts. Yeah, and that alone makes you scratch your head. How do you have a dangerous game that does not protect its players by, at a minimum, guaranteeing contracts? And I would go one further to say the NFL has been notorious for trying to preserve that same windfall of cash and revenue stream by doing anything within its power to advocate against certain players getting full benefits in their retirement. It is really tough to get disability, full disability. And players have gone decades fighting to get full disability. And again, it's a business structure, so I understand it. But at the same time, I hope the NFL is forced to understand just how dangerous the game is and how many players have sacrificed. And we would say it sort of proverbially or just hypothetically risk their lives. And we saw in that moment that it's anything but hypothetical. This young man is risking his life every time he goes out there, along with every young man and every family across America that chooses to play this game. And the NFL needs to do right by its players. Yes, concussion protocol and its response to the CTE litigation was one step, but I think it was a very small step. And we've got to take several more prominent steps to protect our players, both past, present, and I'll go even further and say future. We've got to protect all levels of players that risk so much when they go out and play that game.
So I think, Ed, you mentioned last week, Ed, so you mean to tell me, like, for instance, if we're negotiating a municipal contract for firemen and police, And if they're a young person, man or woman, and they get hurt that first week, there are some protections for them. There are no protections if this player goes out in their first game and they get hurt and it might be a fatal accident.
None.
Okay.
None whatsoever. And even DeMar Hamlin. Let's use specifically the DeMar Hamlin story.
Mm-hmm.
DeMar Hamlin, because of the situation that he was in, and when he got hurt, wasn't even guaranteed to make. There's a top number and a bottom number in every NFL contract, paragraph 5. And the bottom number is if you get hurt, your salary is adjusted to the bottom number. And the Buffalo Bills, very well within the letter of the law as explained in that contract, could have paid him his bottom number. Buffalo Bills made it very well known that they have decided to give him his top number and pay him throughout the remainder of his contract, which they didn't have to do. Now, while the Buffalo Bills did right by him and making sure he gets the remainder of his full compensation and salary for this year, and they made sure that they got the press and the PR related to that. The story within that story is because of that injury and because he's almost certainly not going to play for the rest of the year, is that they would have adjusted his salary. And the story beyond that story is if he doesn't make it to a certain year in his contract, which at year 2 he hasn't gotten there yet, for pension, he has no protections whatsoever going forward, despite what could be, and I pray that it's not, we could have discovered that he has, a heart condition.
Right.
And that's the truth of the matter, is that there are no protections for the players. Scary.
That is absolutely, this is I want you to appreciate this conversation that we're having, right? You've got two fighters, right, who come from a sport that is known as the red light district of sport because it doesn't have any of that at all, right?
Yeah, and I mean, Ed is a boxer, and Zaid is a boxer, just so you know.
Oh, got it.
Ed is a fighter who's a lawyer now. Listen to this, right? Coming from a red light sport like boxing, learning that one of the richest sports in the game, that has a large black-led union, that we don't have these basic guarantees. It's unbelievable. And I'm being self-critical. I'm mad at myself that I didn't know that, right? Because there definitely needs to be a movement just among athletes themselves for their basic well-being. We're getting ready for Dr. King's birth anniversary. One of the things that Dr. King talked about are some basic economic and human rights that everybody should have. Guaranteed income, right? And some guaranteed protections for your medical well-being. How is that so in 2023? And why is that not driving the conversation behind this young man getting hurt like that?
There was a media personality in Cleveland, and I apologize for not remembering his name, but the brother said it. He was like, "This the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about." And, we find these convenient stories to celebrate and get behind a particular message that continues to favor the NFL. But he was spot on. He said, if this brother can't play football again, there are no protections for his salary going forward. His mother's going to have to figure out how to pay his health care costs going forward. And until we really deal with that, then we're just sort of sugarcoating around the conversation.
And just pause right there, Bobby. His mother's going to have to figure out how to pay his health care when he was just at the point where he was ready to buy his mother a house if he hadn't done so already.
Yeah, and so many players in this facet of football, because I'm on the other side now. I get to interact with and communicate with people that played the game several years ago, at this point, decades ago. And it is unfortunate to see that while I wish that my story was the norm and not the exception, most of my former teammates didn't go back for law school, and they aren't attorneys and doing very well in terms of their career post football. Why? Because a lot of it is front loaded. You think that you're going to make enough money to live off of for the rest of your life, and the truth of the matter is that we thought that because we didn't have any real understanding of money. It's not enough money to live off of for the rest of your life for most people. And without that security of having the education, without the security of some career trajectory, without the security of having an organization or a corporation like the NFL to protect its past players, a lot of my former teammates and people that I consider brothers near and dear to my heart are struggling in life. And the NFL continues to make just countless amounts of money year in and year out off of those same types of players from those same socioeconomic backgrounds. And it's heart-wrenching. It's arguable 78% of the NFL is made up of Black workforce. And
that's right.
It's wrong. It's wrong. I mean, there's no way to say it. And I know you say a Black-led union, but the union and how they represent the players, it's all messed up in my humble opinion, because it's the player representative. Each team has a player representative. More times than not, the player representative is someone that has I would call it veteran status. Someone that's been in the league, that's already reached pension, someone that has the large contract, one of the few large contracts on each team, that has some guarantees up front with the larger signing bonus. The only thing that you're guaranteed is the signing bonus. When you spell your name right, you get paid, but most people don't get large signing bonuses. But
right.
a large percentage of the NFL doesn't fit in that category. So the people that are speaking up and representing the entire NFL are the very small minority of veterans that make it to that status, that have a lot more security than, let's call it 90% of the NFL. That, like me, I was 53 and a half. At any day, I could be out of the NFL with no securities whatsoever. The NFL is made up much more of me, my types, than it is of the representatives that are speaking up on behalf of the entire NFL.
So what do you say?
That's absolutely atrocious. That's absolutely atrocious. One is because I think we missed an opportunity with Damar Hamlin, right, to really begin to correct some of the wrongs. And I think that, there were a few brothers that I saw, on some of the sports programs who said they wanted to keep it real. And they discussed some of the things you just said, right? That one, there was no guaranteed income. One, there was no disability protection. And at almost any moment within the first couple of years of your football career, it could be over. And I sort of heard that same thing from Michael Strahan, who said that it was by God's grace that he was able to play for 17 years and be as successful as he was, right? But the problem is, at this particular point, there doesn't seem to be any unity amongst the brothers who play football in order to get the NFL to do what's right.
Come on.
Right.
And so the question I would have for those brothers who used to play, is there any communication between the brothers who are currently playing and the brothers who used to play? And in saying that, I've got to ask, is brothers like Deion Sanders, is he part of the problem or is he part of the solution? Because he's now being held as one of the greatest turnaround coaches in the world, and you got players, young players from all over the country who had pledged to other schools now changing their pledges to go up to Colorado and play with him and put their life on the line to play college football with hopes of getting to the NFL, which doesn't offer them a guaranteed career. But here's our brother, Deion Sanders. I'm not knocking him making $5 million. God bless him. But at the end of the day, the brothers who do play in the NFL are not getting the kind of justice and guarantees that they should get for putting their lives on the line every day going out playing football.
Phenomenal question. And I would say, while I don't know Deion personally, I'll just use his. It is widely known that Deion, because of his football injuries, had to have 2 toes amputated. Widely known, and people made jokes about it. He's 8 toes down, and that's how we do in locker rooms. We mess with each other. And I use that to say that same surgery that one of his former teammates may have had to endure would not be paid for. A lot of guys don't have insurance.
Wow.
Deion is a part of that small slice of people that was able to play a long time, and he was able to play because he earned every second that he played. Deion is one of the greatest when it comes to what he did on the football field. Indeed. But I think when you get to that upper echelon of player, with the yellow jacket, the Hall of Fame guys, to be honest, we're speaking 2 different languages. Those type of guys don't speak the same language as someone like myself that, I had to take the hard way in as an undrafted free agent. There were 16 receivers, I had to fight and whittle down, so I got an opportunity, and I knew that that opportunity could be taken from me at any point. And the large majority of the NFL players fall in my category, not in Deion's category. So I like that you use that example, because the NFL player reps are largely in the Deion category. They're guys that have already reached veteran status. They're guys that have gotten to their second, maybe even third contract. They're guys that no matter what, they're going to be okay. And they're the ones speaking on behalf of the entire NFL. And I think what the NFL, the current players need to do is make sure that there are more voices heard from the silent majority. Those players that don't have the guaranteed contracts in terms of a large signing bonus, which is most of us. Those players that don't have any guarantees because of the uncertainty in terms of their job security status. Those players that they know that they're one injury away from being in a very different situation and possibly could need to rely on mom and dad to pay for basic insurance and healthcare costs. Those players need to have more say so. Now, your question was about the former players, and there are these retired player cohorts around the country, and they're regional. And I at one point was more active with the New York, New Jersey chapter, and we'll get more active again in the near future. But we're trying. The NFL's try to come up with player development programs for players after the fact. There are several moving pieces that hopefully will move to the center and understand that the Damar Hamlin situation, while being a tragedy, and while being so prominent because of the cardiac arrest event and they needed to perform CPR on the field in order to preserve that young man's life, it's not so exceptional because of what it represents. And I think that cooler heads need to prevail, and all of us need to put our self-interest aside, whether it be the veteran player, whether it be the former player, whether it be the player rep, whether it be the organization itself, and come to a middle ground and create something that helps protect players, because there is a ton of money available. We just have to figure out how to utilize it to be more equitable for players.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I wanted to just a little. There's the other side, news. We wanted to do this last week, and then we're here this week, which is this conversation will be going on for a while. But in the midst of 2 weeks, we had this another situation develop with the coach from Texas, Coach Lovey, I believe.
Yeah.
And and then, I'm sorry.
Lovey Smith.
Smith.
Yeah. And he was fired for winning. And, and there was a big conversation around that. And again, back to the NFL. And I was listening to a panel with Stephen A on there. And I can't remember who else was on the panel. But one of the things that one of the panelists said, he can't recall going into one locker room and saying, I want y'all to go out there and lose today. And, you never get that speech recorded. And, and if you want, and no coach goes in to say, I want to be the coach that loses, and I didn't want to jump so quick, but time is running. I just wanted you to say a little about that situation as well, because it's still NFL.
Yeah, we talked about it today on. I also do a podcast, Ball Hawk Sports Talk, where we talk sports business and entertainment, the collision thereof. We talked about that today, and today's episode I called Black Friday the 13th, and I talked about sort of this concept of being Friday the 13th being unlucky. Well, they call the Monday after the last Sunday in the regular season, they call it Black Monday. The negative connotation of black being associated with that Monday and coaches being fired aside, I did talk about in terms of this particular firing when it comes to Lovie Smith. And Lovie Smith is one of very few people that are still on the planet Earth that has been the head coach in a Super Bowl.
Black head coaches in the NFL. That's right.
Black coach in the NFL, but also coaching the Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl that he coached in, there were two black coaches. He coached against another black coach in that Super Bowl. And while he lost that Super Bowl, he deserved way more respect than he was given by the Houston Texans on the heels of, in as many years. So in 2 seasons, they have hired a black man to come in and try to right the ship in a situation that would be tumultuous at best, but with a very porous roster of a situation that is insurmountable. They have hired and fired black men after 1 season. David Culley in the previous year, which we knew he was sort of a stopgap provision, and then now Lovie Smith. And it is beyond me that the NFL that has a black eye when it comes to the Rooney Rule and hiring, retaining, mentoring, developing black coaches. It is beyond me that same NFL will bring in not 1 but 2 black coaches, the same organization that the black quarterback, Deshaun Watson, before his legal troubles, had already said he didn't want to stay in that particular franchise because of situations that went unstated, but you can imagine now what they could and might have been. It is beyond me that NFL allows this to continue, and it's tough, right? And Lovie Smith, I love the fact that he went out and did what he should have done, because it's tough based on the statistics and based on the history. It's tough to get a job in the NFL. They'll use that same loss if he had lost the game. They'll use that same loss as a reason why they didn't hire him. I'm happy he did what coaches do. Go win a game. Go win a game. Good for Lovie Smith. He went out with dignity. You know, what's the saying? I'd rather, die on my feet than live on my knees. Good for him for going out and winning the game and doing what coaches do. And if they use that against him in future employment opportunities, it just speaks more to the problem that the NFL has. I'm happy that Lovie Smith did what he was supposed to do, go out and win a game. The Houston Texans should be ashamed of itself, and the NFL as the parent company of these respective organizations, seeing not 1 but 2 in just as many years, in 2 years, the hiring and firing of 2 black coaches in 1 season. They had 1 season to succeed. Meanwhile, in Indianapolis, the team that he beat, like they hired a guy that had less coaching experience than I have. And my coaching experience is at the youth football level. They hired him to come in and be the interim coach of an NFL team. Look, I love the NFL still. I'm still a consumer, but I will not be apologetic about things that are wrong. It was wrong when they fired David Culley, unless it was already predetermined that he was going to do 1 year. But it's significantly more wrong to bring a guy in like Lovie Smith with that experience, with that veteran status, and has been, by all accounts, a great coach. And even the current player said he had a very below average roster playing very good football. To bring him in and fire him in that fashion, disrespectful.
That's right.
So we had you for so much, and you have to come back more often now.
Absolutely.
The irony is that last time you were on our show, you were in the studio down at Rutgers, and you were on, and you were running for office, and that was the first time you ran in South Orange, and your team, you didn't prevail, but now you come back as an elected official. Do what's going on in South Orange?
God is amazing. A lot going on in South Orange. You have to come and help us be better as a community, because we need help from inside, outside, from up, down, every which way. But I'm happy to be in the seat, happy to be an example to my own 2 sons and to other young men in this community about being a public servant and stepping up and trying to do better and do what's right for our community.
And you have to give us history because while I was elected as a council person in South Orange, you're not called a council person. Your title as elected official is
a trustee, although there's an ordinance to change that to be more consistent with the
okay.
respective municipalities. But to date, we are still referred to as the board of trustees. So the equivalent of a council person here is a trustee.
The board of trustees.
Yeah, lift it up. Yeah.
Well, we are proud of you. We're glad that you came on and that you came back. And you have to come back and talk about more. Ed, did you have a final question before we get final question?
Salute to your mother, son. Right?
Thank you.
All right. I'm a son of a single black woman too. I know what that's like. Right? I salute your mother. I know she's proud of you.
And she was a Delta, so double salute to her today. So I appreciate you all. Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to ask. I just want to see if you guys had a last question before I answer him. Hey, did you have a last question? Good?
No.
Okay. And Bobby, you've been here before. Trustee Brown, you have been here before. What hip-hop artist, individual, or group are you listening to as you go and serve the people of South Orange? Get on your podcast on the weekend, or are you out on that? Last week you had to do some of your coaching. So all these many hats you wear, who's inspiring you?
My goddaughter has her she has her Sweet 16 coming up, and I'm going down to Florida, and she asked me what song did I want to come out to that represents me. And I chose the group Outkast by name, Outkast by rhythm, Outkast by the way that they dance, the way that Andre 3000 dresses has always been one of my favorites. But in a strange way, in all of our communities, in the world that we live in this country, we've had to overcome the idea of being outcast and do better and do more. And so I love that group, and that's still my favorite.
And I love artwork. Tell us about the piece of artwork sitting behind you.
Oh, that's Dapper Dan, a young brother. Yeah, the artist Bruce Kern, who's a black artist, does a lot of stuff in Newark. Did this as a live painting for me at one of my events, and Dapper Dan to me represents innovation. It represents the fact that he was designing for the hip hop artists and taking some of the designer stuff, and they tried to sue him, and them same designers had to come back and create his own line. He's Harlem's finest, and Dapper Dan is right there. Dapper Dan is always on my shoulder because it reminds me of what we can do with our own innovation and be unapologetic with our own style. So Dapper Dan is my guy.
Okay, well, you come back, and what a transition is that? We got Mr. Conrad on, Mr. New York himself. Did you hear? You couldn't have transitioned better if we tried to. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And what did you say, sir?
No, I said absolutely. I remember Dapper Dan at 125th Street and Fifth Avenue, where the mosque was. He was on the second floor. We were on the third floor. I remember that furrowed brow he would have. Council person, trustee, when those people, the authorities would come by and shut him down every so often. I remember that worried look on his face. So
and he never gave up.
Every time I see him, I'm happy he's conquered with that big brownstone on Lenox Avenue, Malcolm X Boulevard. So yes, sir, that's great.
Yeah, love his story. Thank you, Reverend. Really appreciate that. Thank
you
all for having me.
You always have a seat, so feel comfortable. Don't wait for us to call. You're always welcome back.
Thank you so kindly.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
All right, my brother.
Peace.
That time, it's that time for all politics are local to vote. Happy New Year, sir.
Happy New Year to everybody. It's good to see all of you, and I trust and pray that 2023 will be a prosperous year for us all. Yes. I'm trying to join many of you.
Well, it started from a political standpoint Down in DC, they started, with a bang. We'll be talking about, was it 15 votes for a law? I wonder how how the history books will reflect that. The 15 votes, was it perseverance? Will they call it something else? But you got Hakeem Jeffries and how he stood, very solid. They tried to. You heard that they kept asking Democrats, and this Hakeem was just like, "It's not our job," But one of the things he did come out and say that him and the speaker did have a very a good conversation to start things out. So, what do you think? How the new year started out down in DC?
Well, I hate to disagree with my brother Zaid, but I actually, and I wish old Larry Hamm was on, because I'm sure I disagree with him. But let me say this: I actually was not disturbed by seeing the mechanics of government. Obviously, it looked real bad for the Republicans because it just looks like chaos and disorganization. But really, it's actually a group of elected officials doing what I wish more Black elected officials would do. First of all, an elected official is not elected, as you well know. So we all know it, but people don't think about it. Elected official is not elected by the other folk in the chamber. So what they think is almost irrelevant to a person representing a particular district. Yes, you want to work with your caucus, but the main thing is you want to do what's in the interest of your voters, what they sent you there to do. And I think what we saw was really actually quite good for democracy, because what you had was a group, a gang, or whatever you want to call them, basically saying, we don't like Republicans. I mean, really, that's a credit to them. From my vantage point, they are Republicans. They don't like Kevin McCarthy. They say he's a part of the swamp, and agree with them or not, they were holding fast to their principles, extracting demands, extracting concessions, which is what elected officials are supposed to do. So I wasn't vexed by it. I mean, I'm sure the Democrats used it for their own fodder, which I saw that they did. But at the end of the day, it really wasn't bad. And, we have seen 15 rounds before. It just hasn't been in 100 years. But, that's not a bad thing from my vantage point.
They were negotiating for that. Well, people say they couldn't get their constituents. They were actually, those 20 were actually fighting for their constituents, getting there. Listen, we're in the minority. Before you get this vote, this is what we need.
Listen, I hear them loud and clear. Now, if McCarthy had been able to strike a deal with a couple of Democrats and got it without them, they would have been in trouble. But because he needed them, and they played their hand a certain way, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Now, now that's what one of the things that Hakeem did say. It's not the Democrats' job to help the Republicans out.
Right.
And
it's not. But you know this, Donna, and this is why I tell our folks, you don't get all upset over Republicans and Democrats fighting on the well of the Congress, because I guarantee you Hakeem Jeffries is going to work closely and successfully with Kevin McCarthy. So if they're working together, why don't the people have the same kind of longitude and latitude to work with whoever they want to work with to get what they're trying to get done?
Right. And I wonder, if 20 or 30 Democrats that come out, there's always a concern, like, yeah, we put ourselves out there, but then when it comes time for them to turn around and do the same thing, that they'll say no. But that would have been really interesting if they would have done that.
Yeah,
if he could have got those 20 from somewhere else, that would have been really interesting.
That would have been very interesting. You're absolutely right. Yes, I agree.
And so, and then we also have, it's just the the information with the classified documents now being and the optics are what they are, but it's definitely not the same. And but in terms of people being, it looks the same because people are if people are not engaged and they're on the TV every day, only thing they heard, he had documents, they both were in the wrong place. They don't know the difference. So how do you think that's going to work out for
Well,
you?
I can assure you, I don't quite agree with that analysis because I believe that the whole thing about the classified documents was much to do about nothing.
Okay.
But since the Democrats took a holier than thou position, Joe Biden himself said it's totally irresponsible for Trump to have these documents. It's only fair and it's only common sense that the Republicans are going to use it in the same way that the Democrats did. And mind you, one of the reasons why it was so important to them to get the House back is they want to have the same kind of hearings that the Democrats had, and they're going to do that. That's politics. But I
Right.
will say this, because I don't, first of all, I would say that Trump had more right to have them because a president does have the right to declassify documents. Now, they'll have to go to court to figure out exactly how that's done. But I'm not sure a vice president has any reason to have classified material, as he would have no ability to declassify. But that's another story. The big story in that is this, because to me, that's much to do about nothing. Unless they're trying to sell some nuclear secrets to the Soviets or the Chinese, to me, that's nothing. But what I do think is something is the Republicans, one of the hearings that they want to have, there are about 3 very interesting hearings they want to have. And one of them is on the collusion between big tech, the media, and the administration prior to the election in 2020. And I'm gonna tell you something, and I want Black people to listen to this, because we get all Democrat this, we're so one track with this. But I want you to think about the implications of a government colluding with a sector like big tech and the media to even in any way impact an election. That Hunter Biden story, the Post had it. I'm not a fan of the Post. They killed me in my election, okay? But the bottom line is the way they colluded to keep that information and that story, which the verdict is not out on that, because the allegation is that Biden, his son Hunter, while he was the president, were doing business with the Chinese, and we know Hunter made a lot of money from the Chinese while his father was vice president. The American people need to look at that, be able to see, is there something improper going on? I don't know about you, but last thing I'm gonna say about this. Imagine if Lyndon Johnson, J. Edgar Hoover, and the Graham family of the Washington Post and Salzberg of the New York Times, imagine had they colluded to deny the American people the right to hear about what Malcolm X was saying or what the Panthers were saying. We have to advocate ourselves to keep all of those tentacles separate. Otherwise, the American people will never be well served. So it's not about who won the presidency. It's about the specter of the state working with the media and this new indispensable vehicle called tech and the information superhighway and affecting what the people heard about.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So it is important, and I think speaking of chairman, one of the things what were we talking about last week? What happened during the civil rights that caused Kennedy to send John Lewis with they're walking across the bridge. Yeah.
Oh, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, or
Yes.
probably the
That was
March on
Johnson.
Washington too,
Right.
wanting to correct John Lewis's speech.
and when they were came to the other side of the bridge and how they were attacked, and what the optics on that when they and that was back then, and
Right.
that's what Chairman was. He was so surprised that they were able to get information out, because that
Oh, to
happened.
show that, right. Yeah,
Right.
because that was very impacting. In fact, the media interrupted a broadcast of the Nuremberg trials and showed that to the world. But like you said, and if the chairman said this, then he and I are in agreement. But
Yeah.
what would have happened had the network, see, because the people you like, it might be in power today, but tomorrow they may be out of power. And what would have happened if they said, no, we're not going to show what Martin Luther King is saying is false information. This. Yeah. So what I'm saying is keep the press independent.
Right.
We should charge them. That's the fourth estate. Everybody depends on an objective, free press. And that's what bothers me. I push back hard on this left-wing stuff because it's the dominant narrative. You can tell the bias of the reporters when they speak. And we don't need that. Trust me, Black people, that's going to be more against us eventually than a benefit to us. And we got
And
to.
what, and Conrad, and for you, you're in New York, and for you, that statement has been something that I don't understand. Who owned BLS and Kiss? And he owned the Apollo.
Well, Mr. Sutton, yeah, Percy
Yeah.
Sutton owned at one point, yeah.
What happened? I mean, we had the black radio at that time. So you had WBLS 98.7, maybe 97.1, a couple of AM stations.
Yeah.
And they just
Well, that was deregulation, number one. It allowed for these corporations to buy up all of these what were previously independently owned radio stations. That's number one. It also
tell me more. Okay, so deregulation happened, but did that mean that Percy Sutton had to sell? I mean, because that literally was our independent voice, and it was like,
right.
And the consumer was sitting here saying, I'm sure Percy Sutton, it wasn't or maybe it was as simple as, wow, this is the highest I will ever get to sell this, so I need to go ahead and it was not another young Percy Sutton that he could have made and sold it to. I would like, especially, and it was like with 98.7, especially, they not only sold it, they made sure it wasn't a black radio.
Wasn't even taught anymore, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. We had RL. We had places where we could go and get information. Even like I said, the music station, because don't forget, Percy Sutton had made a political decision in the early days of gangster rap that he would not play that music in our community. So you're right. I don't know all that happened. I know that. Let me tell you something. My theory is when Percy Sutton passed and when he got infirmed, a lot of the vision of Harlem went into the toilet. When you talk about the Gang of Four, Wrangle, Basil Patterson, David Dinkins, and Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton was the brain. He was the godfather. He was the visionary, and think of a man to become Malcolm's attorney, to purchase the Apollo Theater, to keep that revived, to have buy the black radio station, to lay cable in Queens and Brooklyn. I mean, just a tremendous figure, and unfortunately, his son Pepe and his corporation could not stay together in the form that it was. I don't have all the details. I know there were lawsuits.
Without having the details, what you just said, why the media needs to stay independent, it just made I remember when the sales were going on, And we heard it from, more because I listened to the DJs. So the Friday through Saturday night DJs, a DJ choir, when they were walking into the station and they were losing their jobs, and I was like, it had to be, it was just so shocking that because you were elected official or you had an elected official, you could walk them in to one of these stations and walk them down the hall to another station, and
Absolutely.
the information was known in our
Absolutely.
community. And if we don't understand how the 80s and how we were able to get information out back then,
Absolutely. No, not just the 80s. This is a long
yeah.
tradition. The Birmingham movement. I'm sorry, somebody said something. I said the Birmingham movement that defeated Bull Connor, really led by the children. It was a youth, a DJ that played, soul music or whatever it was, that Motown sound to the young people in Birmingham. He put the messages out that led to the Children's March. So I know everything I ever did as an activist in Philadelphia, in New York City. In Philly, it was Georgie Woods, the man with the goods, Philly's best, WDAS. And of course, in New York, we have benefited from the great, Frankie Crocker, and then, of course, Mark Riley, you name it. Imhotep, Gary Bird, all
And
of
you
that.
one day you have to really come back and talk about that. And then you're um and we're radio as well, because if one of the things that we know, and I'm sure it was on purpose, that when you go into urban communities, that there are certain places where the black stations are, and it's generally around 98 or something like that. So they really had whatever they had, the Percy Suttons and them had, they had they really had it good. And it's unfortunate that wasn't packaged and passed on, that we could still have it in our community, because it
Well,
was
where we missed with black radio, we still have a chance with the black media, but people have to buy ads. I mean, people don't realize this. Mr. Sutton, I used to hear him talk about the need for people to buy ads on the station. So when you talk about Positive Community Magazine, when you talk about the black newspapers and magazines in New Jersey, we have to support, because that's all it comes down to. Can you make this business work?
that simple as that. Well, Conrad, we have to come back and talk about with Hakeem, and we have to really be ready in the Black History Month breakdown and what it is that how do we help Hakeem to prepare 2 years perhaps that he may be the speaker? How do we help him be successful? And how do we, sometimes our community thinks, okay, Hakeem is there, we've done it, that's all. But what is it that we should be asking of our speaker?
Well,
Go
first
ahead.
thing we have to do, and this is part of, again, disabusing ourselves of
And
the
I'll say we're gonna do that to prepare for next show. I'm sorry, because I want it to be a real long conversation.
the fallacy of or the reality of politics. So Hakeem Jeffries is the ranking Democrat. He's the minority speaker of the minority whip. But here's the thing: Hakeem represents a very diverse district in Brooklyn. He does not. He is not in a district like Adam Clayton Powell represented Black Harlem. He represents Orthodox Jews. He represents the various Caribbean diaspora. He represents Russians. He represents a whole Arabs. So what Black people can do, and I know he'll go in Jet Ebony, and I'm proud of him too. I've known him since he was a student. We all know his uncle, Dr. Jeffries, out of Newark, New Jersey, and his brother Kwame is a Black history professor. But what we have to do as Black people is make sure that Congressman Jeffries constantly advocating for what we need, because those other groups will be advocating for them, and he's duly elected by the entire district. So we have to make sure while we're celebrating his ascension, that the people who live in his Brooklyn congressional district are advocating for what our needs are. Oh, can I say one last thing? I'm out.
Yeah, and you got your other half. Monifa's here. Go ahead.
Okay. This Santos thing in New York is, this obviously very despicable character. And I have a cynical view that he probably took every sort of progressive, checked every progressive box. So the good folks of New York would elect their first gay, liberal, Republican, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He checked all the boxes. Okay. And of course, the lies that he told are coming out more and more and more every day. And people are saying he should resign, he should resign. And I want to remind people again, I'm not emotional about politics. I'm really technically talking about he is probably not going to resign. He may go to jail, but I don't believe that the Congress should have the ability to make him resign. And I remind people history and context is everything. Adam Clayton Powell at one time was depicted, seen, viewed, and by many accounts may have been an immoral figure, moral reprobate, quote unquote, et cetera, et cetera. And the good self-righteous colleagues of Powell, after he had amassed this tremendous seniority, he's the most powerful man in Washington, they decided, his peers, that he should not be in Congress. He was just so low down. Nobody had ever seen a congressman like him. He lost. They refused to seat him. Now, of course, he won a Supreme Court decision, and he was seated. However, what they really wanted was to strip him of all his seniority. The people of Harlem had no congressman. So I think that the people of Long Island and sections of Queens are going to have to wait either until he goes to jail and the seat is vacated if he's convicted of a felony, or election time to vote for him again. And that's not protecting him. I hope people understand. That's protecting the fact that voters from a district send the person to represent them in Washington, not their colleagues who are in no position to judge them.
Okay, so when we come back in February, that's the two things
All right, I'm out.
We're going to talk about those things. So we'll see you next month.
Have a good evening. God
All
bless.
right,
Happy New Year. All right.
Monifa, you just going to be here. It's your beautiful self. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. You can't just sit here and be beautiful, honey. What's going on? It's 23.
Oh, thank you. Just wrapping up a long week, but it's Friday, so
okay,
a little break.
Okay, so
How are you?
I'm good. No complaint. Like we were talking with Conrad, down in DC, it seems that they started off with a bang or distractions or what everybody's perception is. And now they have a speaker, and the minority we have Hakeem. What say you about how DC started off?
Yeah, I hope that people were paying attention to the various ways that people basically pull the levers of power, right? So you had a small group of members of Congress hold their party hostage, essentially, right? In order to get what they want. And so we realize that, particularly as Black people, we're not typically we don't have that level of power. We're not at the level of power as this like right-wing faction of the Republicans, but we should be studying the various ways that you make things happen. A lot of times when we try to do things and we try to push something through, we get a lot of pushback even from our peers to say, well, that's not how you make change. That's not how you lobby. That's not how you do advocacy. But what you see on the other side is that people do by any means necessary.
That's right.
Right. And that there's many ways, once you have power, that you wield it in order to get what you want. And that's why we emphasize organizing, grassroots organizing. We have to build power. The rules change the more power you have. And I think that was a display of that. But it was very scary. We still don't know what some of those backroom deals were. We don't know what the concessions were in order to get them to vote yes for the speaker. You know, what were they given in order to fall in line? We may never know the full list.
Monifa, I'm sorry. Don't gloss over what you just said. You said the more power you have, the more the rules change.
Oh, absolutely. The rule, the more power you have, the less the rules apply to you.
Wow.
Right. That's right.
That's a mic dropper right there.
Right.
I don't know if people remember when Trump, the reality star, was running for president, right? He said, I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot and kill someone in broad daylight and nothing will happen to me. And the message he was giving is saying, I'm that powerful.
That's right.
I'm making notes right now.
And everybody was appalled. And then he made a believer out of what he said. You know,
like, not only will nothing happen to me, I'm gonna win this election.
and no one believed it but James Mtume, right?
That's right.
Mtume told us when Mtume was here, he said, don't y'all take that for granted. He said that man knows something that you all don't know, right? That there are more people in this country who believe like he believed, right? That will go and vote for him. And we were like, no, that's not even possible. Come on, man. This man's a joke. He's a reality TV guy. He's not going to go any further. What happened?
The whole concept of having like credentials and being qualified for certain positions are rooted in white supremacy. You know, there's states like Alabama that didn't even have a bar exam, right? If you went to law school and you graduated law school, then you were a lawyer. But once Black people started to go to law school, now there's a bar exam, right? So you see all of these different industries, whether it's politics, you know, even some of the various labor places. As Black people start to come in, now you need a license. Now you need 20 college credits. Now you need to pass the bar exam, right? But when they are in those spaces, they don't need those things, you know. Right. And I think Trump was an example of this, how what you need is power. He had no qualifications. He had never held office, right? But this is what he was able to do. The same is the case with some of the folks that struck a deal with the Speaker of the House just this month in Congress. You know, many of them never held office, you know, weren't political science majors, but they have power.
You know, Monifa, that was what you just said is absolutely true about lawyers, but that was also true for accountants, right? When I was an undergrad, you know, my professor, you know, what he said is that, you know, there was a time when all you needed was a high school diploma in order to be a CPA. He said that didn't change until all you Black guys wanted to be wanted to be accountants.
Well,
or even just to throw in, public college was free. And so Black people started going to CUNY, and then it's thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Colin Powell does a beautiful part. He said in his book, he said the beautiful people of New York did not think it robbery to pay for college for those who couldn't afford, because they wanted a very educated community. And then, like you said, CUNY, it wasn't like that anymore.
And the thing is about, you know, when you talk about, you know, just that whole power dynamic, right? The guy from Queens, the reason why they're allowing him to do all this lying is because he supports their power base, right? Not that because you could believe if that was on the other side and some guy had fabricated an entire resume, right? Let me tell you something. There's no way in hell, right? Somebody like an Ed Riley could put on a resume that I got a college degree, I got a law degree, and them guys not vet me, I mean, to the hill. They listen, you know, we got a brother here in Newark at the water department. Let me tell you something. When that brother solved the issue with the water issue in Newark, and they found out he didn't have a college degree, how would they have known that, right? They went and discovered all of that. No, he didn't. But he did the job of cats who had engineering degrees and all of that. But because Mayor Baraka had chosen this brother, and because he'd come up through the ranks and all of that, there was just no way he could do that. But how did they discover all of that? He said they went so far in his background, they even went to visit his grandmother in South Carolina.
That's
right?
right.
To discover where he went to school. But this guy, you telling me he made it all the way to Congress and no one discovered that all of that was a lie?
No, they did. His opponent brought it out. Nobody just paid attention.
Right.
Nobody took
But
it
he was willing
seriously.
to maintain the power.
Yeah.
Like you
Right.
said, he was going to go
That's
with
my
the
point.
status quo.
Yeah.
Right.
And the only way we can do those types of things if we are also willing to maintain that
That's
power
right.
structure, that white
That's right.
supremacy, i.e. a Herschel Walker, right?
Mhm.
It's like you don't need the qualifications. You can kind of lie about what's happened recently or a long time ago, but we're not going to look into it if you've already agreed that you're going to go with the program.
Yeah,
And
and
so
he came
that's
from
kind
2
of been the
minutes and
message out there
Senate.
to Black people who want to get into politics as well.
But
But it also goes, Monifa, to us. But there's always a lesson that we're taught in our household. Regardless of what they could do, we still have to do 3 times better. But
That's
we're taught that in our household. You know.
Oh yeah, there was a report that came out 2 years ago that said Black women have the most credentials in higher education. You know, percentages wise. You know, Black women as a demographic, and still are paid less than white women, paid less than men. You know, making on an annual basis. But we are taught as young girls, like, yeah, you're going to have to get 2 degrees in this
Right.
thing if you want to just work for the person who has the 1 degree in the same field.
yep, yep. And nothing has changed. That's still a conversation going on in Black households, right? No matter how successful we are, listen, Monifa, that's one of the conversations I've had with the mayor, particularly about what's going on in Newark. We have a lot of young people in the city of Newark who are leaving Newark because they can't find certain jobs that other people in the city have that don't have the credentials that they left and came back with, right?
Mm-hmm.
I.e., Mayor Baraka, when he left, went to Howard, came back, went to Jersey City, got his master's, right? Came back. Thank God he found a job in teaching and was able to stay in the city that he loved. But there are young people in the city that are more than qualified for a lot of the jobs that are here. But the problem is that they're leaving because they can't find a job that's commensurate with the salary, with the cost of living, right?
That's right.
And so that presents a problem, and that was one of the issues, because you've got a lot of these people who are in these pension jobs, right, that they're staying in for 30 and 40 years, but they're not qualified to be there, right? But these young people who come back after, we said, well, go to college, get your degree, go and get 1 or 2, and just like you said, the majority of the sisters in this town got 2 and 3 degrees.
Because we're told to get it, and
Yeah.
that also adds a cost. So you can't find a job that's commensurate with the cost of living, but also student loans are on top of that.
That's right. And that was a conversation we had with the assemblywoman. Do you remember that, Zaid? When we were talking about, she was saying that was the reason she went back to college, right?
That's right.
Because she was saying she couldn't afford to pay a student loan, so she said the student loan would stop sending her a bill if she went back to school.
If she went back to school, I know several people who have done that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much, that because you're able to, your loan stops. I'm trying to think of the word that you're able to do, but while you're in
Deferred.
school, yeah, deferred payments, exactly. And that is sometimes, and as a matter of fact, a lot of people would say multiple degrees. The most common reason is because they couldn't afford to pay the student loan, so it was better to stay in school.
And when costs like this are up against us, it keeps us in poverty. Like, no matter how educated we are, and we have to ask why there's certain members of Congress that are fighting so hard against student loan forgiveness. Like, why are they like a dog with a bone
Mhm.
on this issue? And it's because it disrupts capitalism in a way that the people who you want to keep in low paying jobs, right? They're like I'm just going to take anything because I've got all these bills, as opposed to having the freedom to choose other positions and in the field that they want. It really causes it makes it an an employees market, right? If people get rid of their student loans, so then they got more freedom to decide to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And it's, we really have to think about, why are they fighting so hard on this? Taking it to court, taking it all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's to keep us trapped in this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And I actually met a young lady from Harrisburg. I said, so she introduced, and we talking like, oh, where do you live? I was like, she said, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I was like, oh, how am my student loan? Huh? She looked at me and laughed. She said, and I was like, what? Then we started talking about, the campus of the student, how big. She said it's a very big organization and how they have expanded many times. But if you say Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to a lot of people, that is synonymous to it with their student loan. It is, unfortunate that people can just remember, oh, that's my student loan, because and most people have had their student loan longer than they have. They paid off their house sooner than they paid off their student
Their
loan.
student loan. No, it's true. And there's certain fields where the people were supposed to get their loans forgiven, and there has been a lot of bureaucracy in that, like teachers and nurses.
So
and all these roadblocks.
Yep. That's, my wife went through that, right? Where, she was supposed to have, she had predatory lenders who had loaned her money to go to school, and they were supposed to forgive those loans. And it took almost 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years for them even to get to the point where they would even hear it. I mean, which was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, they make it difficult on purpose, because then people just give up and keep paying it.
Yeah, well, that's what she did. She kept paying because she was afraid that if she didn't pay it, they gave her the option, but she was like, "No, I think my best bet is that I keep sending this payment in, because if they rule against me, then all of a sudden I'm gonna have all of this interest, I'm gonna have all of this money that I've got to pay." And sure enough, I mean, 2 years later, what they realized is yep, that was predatory lending. But the thing is when you a young Black female and you single and you trying to figure your way out in the world, what you realize is that the only way up is to get an education.
Yeah.
Right?
And to take out these loans. And it's not just student loans. I want to make this point. All of the things that they are fighting against in Congress are things that keep us in poverty, right? Yeah. Why fight so hard against universal child care? Because the same folks you're talking about, if it costs more to put your child in child care than it does to send them to college in certain states, then a lot of people are working just to pay for child care, right? Fighting against paid family leave, fighting to ban abortion. All these things are designed to keep working people in poverty, keep us in a cycle where we're constantly on the treadmill just to make it to the next check. If you can't control how many kids you have and when. So those are the types of things we really have to look at. It's like, who is this benefiting? This is all benefiting big corporations, just like the tax breaks for corporations that they're fighting for, and also to keep the workforce in place so that we don't move away from these jobs that are exploitive. They want to keep us in those jobs that are exploitive.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hakeem Mabuti told us this. I guess about a year ago, or maybe before, when you remember Zaid when Hakeem came on?
Yes, I did.
And he said that they could have done something about those student loans then, right? But they were procrastinating, just as you said, right? They have a vested interest in making sure that they keep certain groups of people in debt. And
in debt, and they won't at work.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the way it's going. And so when you think about it, I mean, thank God, my wife is now debt free, right? But you think about all the years that she's been in that situation, that level of trauma, that level of stress, right, was just absolutely incredible.
Well, this tool of keeping us in debt goes back to post-slavery, right?
Right.
Reconstruction. Like the whole sharecropping business model was designed so that people are like, oh, great, now I finally get to be able to charge for my labor and earn money. But the system that was designed around that and sharecropping, you remained in debt because everything you needed to use in order to earn that money you were making, you had to rent from the very same plantation owners. So
Right.
it's almost like rolling the same, business model all the way up. Is that if you can keep someone in debt to where they can't demand more and leave an exploitive situation, you're able to keep generating profits.
That's right. Dependency.
Extreme dependency.
Colonizing of labor to keep you dependent on the system. That's right.
Absolutely.
So I think it's going to be an interesting 2 years with the current, back to your question, Donna, about what has happened and who's controlling at least the House right now. We're going to see back to back. They already tried to put forth a nationwide abortion ban. Of course, fighting against the student loan piece, making sure we don't get the components of Build Back Better, which was all the health care and the child care and the paid family leave stuff, making sure none of that stuff goes forward. But then also they recently put forth a bill called Prosecutors Must Prosecute Act. And this is in response to how the movement had done so well by putting in place prosecutors all over the country who were looking to do things like reform bail.
That's
and
right.
put less people in prison and open up old cases to show police brutality, like Chesa in San Francisco and the prosecutor in Chicago. And so they're also trying to roll back some of the progress that has been made in bail reform. So
not some, all of it. Not some, all of it. Not some, all of it.
They trying to do all of it. And this is while we have things like, everyone has seen this young 30-year-old teacher, right? Keenan Anderson in Los Angeles was tased to death.
I'm glad
by the LAPD that he flagged down for help after a car accident.
Yeah.
We just saw the data come out that in 2022, this is 2 years after a national uprising around police brutality, the police killed more people than any year since they've been recording it on record.
That's right. That's right.
So this is a moment of backlash. We can't ignore it. And everything that they do in the House, we have to pay very close attention because they're going to try to put in place a lot of things to, again, keep us in debt and keep the police literally boot on our necks.
And that young brother that they killed, he was the cousin of the sister who actually found that Black Lives Matter.
That's right.
And so how do we know that wasn't actually some kind of hit? Right.
Once they realized who he was, because he said he started getting nervous when he was waiting. They're like looking into him. He flagged him down for the accident. So then he's getting nervous, like, what's going on? Because we know whenever we're stopped by the police, they're running, who are you, warrants, all that. So we don't know. We really don't know. There's a situation in Illinois where a young man was a 17-year-old boy, I'll pull up the name in a minute, was killed by the police 2 years ago. And his sister, who is 15, is working at some deli, and she refused to serve the police that came into the deli. And she was fired. They went after her. But they went in there knowing that she would not serve them, like picking on our families who've been fighting against police brutality.
And let's say this about Brother Anderson. This brother was a school teacher.
That's right.
In Washington,
how many black male school teachers do we have?
Yeah. Well, there you go. And so we're talking about somebody who was not a criminal, right? And they're trying to disparage him now by saying, "Oh yeah, cocaine in his system and all of that," right? But that has nothing to do with this man was calling you guys to come help him. He wasn't asking you, to take my blood test. He wasn't asking you to go into my background. He was asking you for help because someone hit his car.
I'm going to say something that's really controversial too. Similar to having to have certain credentials to hold positions being false and being a way to maintain white supremacy, so is drug policy in this country, right? Newsflash, white people use drugs. They use drugs at a higher rate than any other demographic. and all across their class systems. I'm sure if you go anywhere from Mar-a-Lago to the trailer parks, there's cocaine. People use drugs. It's recreational. It's used specifically to criminalize us, right?
That's right.
And so by putting those drug laws in place, they were never going to prosecute white people at high levels for using drugs. But again, it was just another tool similar to debt, right? To keep you in a certain position. And so some people, I don't know if he had cocaine in his system.
That's right.
But that is not a death sentence.
That's
and
right.
A whole lot of people in government and everywhere use cocaine.
Well said, sister.
And we don't even know if that's true.
But, and we don't know if it's true.
That's right. We don't
they
even
kind of throw it out there so that you don't dehumanize someone because they use cocaine.
A justification for all of a sudden this brother being tased to death, right? That's a justification for that. No, not at all.
Y'all know how many doctors are on drugs and stuff, but that's another show.
Yeah, Monifa, before we have Dr. Pritchett who's getting ready to come up, and he's going to talk about his Dr. King what he's doing at Seton Hall this weekend, but also the legislation that you're working on to put forth. What's that bill called?
So there was the People's Response Act that
not that one, the other one. Tell me the other one.
Counselors Not Criminalization or the People's Guarantee.
Okay, I think it's
what's the subject? Is it the Momnibus, Black Maternal Health?
It came out right with the you were working on this right along. I think you like with Representative from Massey Presley and good Lord, what's that legislation? Go ahead, but tell me about
two of her bills we are supporting. One is counselors not criminalization. And so she's really putting forth that what our schools need, we need therapists, we need nurses, we need counselors, like our children need care, but the schools can't afford it because they're full with half a dozen police officers at the door. So she's saying to pull that money out of this quote unquote school safety officers. And we see that kids mostly are getting abused and also arrested by them, and to put that money into health and wellness. So that's one of her bills, which is amazing. And then our other bill that we support from Sister Ayanna Presley is the People's Guarantee. And that bill is to repeal the 1994 crime bill, which touches on the drug stuff, all the other stuff that I was just talking about. So the People's Guarantee will be introduced shortly, and counseling, not criminalization, will be reintroduced shortly. Both of those by Ayanna Presley.
Yeah. Are you available to do we're going on TV momentarily from your computer? Is that something you'd be interested in?
Mute him.
We're going on now because the show is scheduled for 8
Can you mute him, Ed?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So because we had a new Congress, so you have to reintroduce everything. Okay. So keep us up on that so we can that might you're gonna want phone calls and all of that.
All of that. Let me tell y'all, all the listeners, anything that Ayanna Presley or Cori Bush puts out, you guys support it. Y'all jump on that. We've got some really good champions in the 118th Congress. We have Jamal Bowman, who's trying to do some stuff around schools and making schools green. And so when I come back again, I'll just have all those bills ready for folks to figure out how to support them.
Just have them on a list, and like we can put it up so we can get people. And that's one of the things we have to start getting people to understand the people's part in legislation. Like the legislature can bring it to the floor, but that's when the people have to start calling and making sure that these bills are brought up for a vote, and that they're are so that they know what the bills are as well. Oftentimes they just citizens don't understand their role and how important it is when we start flooding lines with phone calls and to say we need you to support this bill, vote on this bill, and so on and so forth. That citizen action is very important, and we just want people to understand that the voice matters, and especially when a voice comes in a multitude.
That's right. You can't just vote. You have to also hold them accountable and or support them once they're in office, right? That's another important part of the civic engagement. And just before I leave, I do want to underscore something, you know, kind of pushing back on the previous guest, which is like Congressman Santos needs to step down.
Yep. Yep. Let's be clear.
None of us could go and lie. I mean, not just to hold Congress, a job at the post office. I have a friend who got a job at the post office, worked there for almost a year, but failed to disclose an arrest that he thought was one level and it was actually another level, and was fired from delivering mail.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, these are the types of things, these are the contradictions that we have to highlight and we have to push, because it also helps to chip away at that power we were talking about earlier that's going to allow them to prop up all these dangerous bills that we know are going to be coming back to back in the 118th Congress. That if we can get him to step down, which we should, because what he's done is illegal and also unethical to his constituents, and it also helps in terms of stopping the amount of votes for these dangerous policies.
Right. Well, even before you go, you got to give a birthday. We've got a very important day tomorrow to acknowledge. There's some birthday shout outs that definitely need to happen for somebody tomorrow. I know you want to shout them out.
You know, I've been on before to talk about how we've recently won the freedom of our elders, some of our political prisoners, one of which just last year was Sundiata Acoli. Many people celebrate Assata Shakur and have read her book, but didn't know a lot about her co-defendant, which was Sundiata Acoli, who spent 5 decades in prison. Well, tomorrow's his birthday. And so not only is he finally home from behind the walls with his family, he actually gets to celebrate his born day. And he actually happens to have the same birthday as Herman Bell, who's one of New York 3, who was just freed 3 years ago, who just won freedom. And I want to just put that in context to say that just a few weeks ago, Dr. Mutulu Shakur walked out of prison, in a federal prison in Kentucky. A lot of people know him as being the father of Tupac Shakur, but he was also the co-defendant of Sundiata Acoli, and he was incarcerated for liberating Assata Shakur from prison. So when we say free them all, we're fighting to get them free. And for some of them, they're actually incarcerated for freeing their comrades. And so we're really happy that Mutulu Shakur is home. Sekou Oding is home, Sundiata Acoli's home, Herman Bell is home, and happy birthday to Sundiata and Herman.
That's right.
Happy birthday. You know, Monifa, you know, one of the things I want to say is that we always are blessed every time you come on, but we want to say thank you to you for the work you put in, because I know the sacrifice. You got a family and you still stay on the front line, right? And want to say, sister, I got mad respect for the work you do, you know, not only on the legislative front, but what you continue to do to stay and keep our people conscious. So we appreciate you every time you come on, sis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Baba Zaid, Donna, Ed, for the platform.
I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, peace.
Yep, straight ahead. All right.
Did we lose Dr. Pritchett? No, there we go. Yeah, there you go. Larry stepped away for a second. Okay.
So you want to set this up, Zaid?
Yeah, this weekend. This weekend is the birthday weekend of the drum major for justice, the amazing grace, the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Right, and we've got some serious activity going on to reflect the importance of lifting up that legacy. So we have two very important guests who are most well equipped to do that. Ademo Chung and Lawrence Hamm, who is no stranger to this airwaves, is with us regularly. Dr. Forrest Pritchett, good to have him. Dr. Pritchett, is this your first time on the show?
No.
So.
Believe it or not, a few years ago, I think just before COVID, I think Ed and Jonathan and Bashiri, it seems like the three of them, if I remember correctly, might have interviewed me one Friday night.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I've only been with the show for a few years, and the show's in year 13. So that's how important and this show is in terms of its consistency and its
presence. And
Oh,
we
absolutely,
thank
absolutely.
that man in the left-hand
Absolutely.
corner of your screen, the great Ed Rowley, for setting that off and setting it in motion. But
Yes.
Dr. Pritchett is the architect and the man behind an important scholar that uses that trains scholars, grounding them in the teachings of Dr. King, the MLK Scholars Program at Seton Hall. No, you had some folks, you had some scholars that were they able to get on with you?
Yes, I believe there are at least 3, and I'm hoping you can.
Scroll down
Johnny,
there,
Fatima,
there they go.
Gerald. Yeah, and I hope there's one more. Hopefully, Gerald Wesley, if you can identify him, if it works out.
They're trying to come in and you can.
Here he comes. There's Gerald.
Right, and Fatima was with us
that's it.
a few weeks ago. Okay,
All right, but Zaid, before we get started, let me just say, for full disclosure, over 30 years ago, when we were doing All Politics the Local and creating, the magazine, Pritchett, along with Dr. Sells, kept us standing up at Seton Hall. Whenever them white folk would come against us, Pritchett and Sells would be in front of us, right? So
Amen.
they are just as much a part of that staff. When y'all talk about our history and how we get to All Politics the Local, we had some faculty members on that campus that stood with us, and Pritchett was there, and he still looked as good as he did then. Look as good as he look now. And I want to say thank you publicly, Professor Pritchett, for what you did.
Bless you, Ed. Bless you, Ed.
Queen
You
would agree with that.
Back to Atlantic City. I'm not Reverend Dr. Pritchett. I'm just another brother from AC, from the village. And you have to ask Sister Ingrid Hill, what is the village? But somebody had the progressive foresight when they put up the public housing on the north side of town, which is where all the black folks lived. They actually called it the village. I think they were probably trying to slip a little progressive concept into that public housing piece. So when we say the village, we're not talking about our symbolic village. We are talking about people who were straight out of the village in Atlantic City. So I'm proud to identify and acknowledge those roots. As a matter of fact, I want to make one other comment, and it deals with the last discussion on higher ed and Brother Hamm and Pop, when they try to motivate students to understand that they have the right to ask for a free education. Do you know I wrote a paper in the 1960s, and I was at Delaware State University. The professor told us to pick a controversial topic and to write about it. And I was shocked to find out that in California, because I didn't know this, but in New York City, they had free public education in the colleges at that point in time.
Wow.
All of those,
That's right.
when you look at, I guess, the City University of New York and Brooklyn College, who were then, most of their students probably were what we call European immigrant backgrounds. Those generations did experience a free college education. They only paid probably the college fee. And then I looked at a very progressive model that came out of California, where they set up, maybe they called it the Universal College Access Program, but they passed a law that said that it was called the Master Plan for Higher Ed. They said there must be one public college within 1 hour of every California resident. And the only thing, they charge no tuition to California residents. They only charged a college fee, which is maybe $100 per semester. But that became my model for understanding the concept of how a democracy, if you would, should really meet the needs of the population. So I think students in today, the 21st century, where we are now, need to understand the historical paradigms that are out there. So that when someone says we should have tuition-free colleges, well, obviously the economy of the 21st century is vastly larger and different than it was in the 20th century. You ought to understand that there are historical precedents and antecedents for what we would be looking for in the 21st century.
And Dr. Pritchett, real quick, when you did that paper, were you able to show the benefits of having?
Of course.
Okay.
We got folks that I didn't know, but who became doctors, lawyers, and teachers. And that was considered part of the American dream. for those who were locked into those like urban areas. But it wasn't our people who were benefiting from that. It was, once again, all those children of the descendants of European immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Did you hear that, Larry?
Absolutely. What he's talking about.
Yeah.
Cooney was free in my lifetime. It wasn't until around the time that Ronald Reagan became governor of California, and when the students all over the country were rising up against the Vietnam War as a punitive measure against the students and against student protests, Reagan and others put forward this idea that they should have to pay for their education. And that's really what happened. It kind of swept across the country, and now Cooney is no longer free, no free college education in California. Also keep in mind that some of the land grant colleges that were established after the Civil War, college was free, and initially many of these land grant colleges were not just established for the free people, but they were also established for those European immigrants who had come to America and who took advantage of the land grant program that the United States government put forward to give them free land. Dr. Pritchett, we in the same generation, so you can remember some of those cowboy movies when they would have all the wagons lined up, and they would say, "All right, now, when we shoot this gun, y'all go on out there and get that land."
Yep.
The so-called free land was the Native Americans' land.
Yes.
And the Native Americans had been moved from the east to the west, and then once they were moved into the west, they were put on reservations. Their land was confiscated, and they gave the land to these European immigrants. So the European immigrants got free land. Not only did they get free land, they got free training through these land grant agricultural colleges that were established. And in addition, the federal government established a system of county agents who would go from farm to farm to advise and help these former European, because all of them they were European descended, but many of them had been born here in the United States. So, this idea that free college comes from Mars, it's not, as Dr. Pritchett said, it had historical precedent. I would also add to that the idea of free health care is not from Mars. All the advanced industrial countries, the 34, I think, Dr. Pritchett, they call them the OECD countries, the advanced high income countries, all of them except the United States have free health care. Some of them had established systems of free health care at the end of the 19th century. The United States knew that this was something that it should do, but racism always got in the way. Teddy Roosevelt had put forward the idea of free health care, but it didn't get a lot of ground. After World War II, when all these soldiers were coming back and they needed all kinds of services, Truman wanted to establish a system of free health care in the United States. But what happened was the Southern Dixiecrats resisted it because all the hospitals receive some type of federal funding. And once you receive $1 of federal funding, you're under the laws of the federal government and not the state government. So that meant if you had a system of free healthcare supported by the federal government, you could no longer have racially segregated hospitals. Remember, that's what they had, not only in the South, but in the North. In fact, the building where the colored hospital was in Newark is still there on West Kenny Street. It's a Baptist church now. But that building 2 blocks down from Abyssinian, and there's a marker on the building that showed that this was the colored church. This was not the colored church, the colored hospital. So that's why we don't have race is in everything. Race is the stumbling block of America.
And as Dr. Pritchett, as you begin and the students begin, we do want to be reminded that we've went back to some form of free college with the community colleges, but it's income based now. So like Essex County, there's free, and Union County, and CUNY is a little probably more similar that as their programs in the past, but there is a form of free college, but it's primarily income based.
And it's only community colleges.
Yes.
Yeah, city colleges and community college.
You know, Brother Hamm was really dropping an education for liberation on us, and those gems that he was just dropping on us.
Actually, I wanted
students watching this were taking notes.
Yeah, I actually wanted to stop that and back him up, and then to rewind him and use Dr. King as the anchor for that, because one of the things that's so important about the Dr. King's legacy, that's one of the things that Dr. King was fighting for at the end of his life, right? That doesn't get talked about, that doesn't get lifted up. So let's segue now to our discussion about why Dr. King is so important on this weekend. And we want to get each and every one of you. We're really excited to hear these young scholars to hear what Dr. King means to them and what's going on this weekend and why Dr. King is so important at this critical moment in this country's history.
I don't know who can hear us now.
Everybody can hear.
Everybody can hear you.
Demon, why don't you start with what we're going to do on Sunday?
Well, Sunday is Dr. King's birthday, his actual birthday, January 15th. And on every January 15th, the People's Organization for Progress, we have a march in honor of Dr. King and the martyrs of the civil rights movement, but not just to look at the past, but also to look at the present in terms of the struggle that we have to continue against racism, against white supremacy, and against economic injustice and the impact of capitalism. One of the things I was going to say is that everybody should get this book. If you don't have it already, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? That is Dr. King's 5th book. And if you really want to know what Dr. King was thinking at the time, around the time he was assassinated, you should read that book. But we're marching on Sunday. The march is going to start Sunday, 2:00 p.m. at the Martin Luther King statue, 495 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Newark. That's right there in front of the Hall of Records. We're going to march down to the Federal Building and back, and then we're going to rally and have speakers from the more than 20 organizations that have endorsed the march. The other thing I would like to recommend is that people get this book too. This one.
Testament of Hope.
Hard to find now.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Testament of Hope.
I got it upside.
There you go. That's
there
good.
it is.
That's good.
Book. Yes.
A Testament of Hope. The reason I like this book, you see, it's a tome, right? It's a pretty thick volume, right? But the reason I like this book is because nearly a third of the book are the speeches and sermons and articles that Dr. King authored in the last 2 years of his life. I mean, it goes from like the 1950s all the way up to 1968. But if you read those speeches, and in fact, there's some stuff in some of these speeches that he gave in 67 and 68 that are not in this book, Where Do We Go From Here? Because this book he wrote, this book he wrote in 1966 was published in 1967.
That's right.
So this goes up to like 1966. But Dr. King said a lot in 1967, and even in the 4 months before he was assassinated on April the 4th, 1968. And Dr. King was quite radical. That's why they had to kill him. And believe me, he was assassinated. And it wasn't by a lone gunman. His widow, Coretta Scott King, went into federal court in Atlanta, sued for $1 because she didn't want anybody to say that she was suing to get money. She wanted people to know that she was suing to get the truth about the assassination. And you can look at the judge's ruling in that case that said at least 11 intelligence agencies. That when I first read that, I didn't know we had 11 intelligence agencies. I thought there was only the FBI and the CIA. Yeah. But every branch of the military has an intelligence unit. You know, and so all these intelligence agencies, the Memphis Police Department, were part in some way, to greater and lesser degrees, played a role in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And they had to assassinate him because he was building a movement to challenge the fundamental economic order. At the end of his life, that's what he was doing. He was engaging in the poor people's movement. And then where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Dr. King said, quote, I want to bring 1 million people to Washington, D.C. I want to bring the Negroes from the ghettos, the Latinos from the barrios, the Native Americans from the reservation, and the poor whites from Appalachia. These are his words. And we're going to engage in massive nonviolent civil disobedience. We're going to shut Washington, D.C. down until Congress passes an economic bill of rights, which would guarantee income, housing, jobs, and education to all people in this country. So they had to kill him because he was building a movement that reached across all lines, and they knew that if they didn't stop him, this was the work of the COINTELPRO program. That's a real program of the FBI. Its stated objective was to prevent the rise of a Black Messiah. And they specifically targeted Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King. Malcolm was assassinated in February of 1965, and King was assassinated in 1968. And I don't want to drone on and on because I know I'm putting people to sleep.
Stuff, good stuff.
I would say this: check out the release of the Kennedy documents. There was a law passed, and I think it's called the Kennedy Act or something, because first of all, when something is classified, it's supposed to be declassified after 50 years. Now, they declassified some of the Kennedy documents, but they left a lot of the other documents classified. And there are people trying to get the remaining documents. They released some in November. And I say, look at those documents, because remember, Kennedy was assassinated too. And some of the same people who were involved in the assassination of President Kennedy, you'll find were also involved in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King.
Well said, brother. Well said.
Right on, right on. Now, Dr. Pritchett, why don't you tell the community about the best kept secret that is the MLK Scholars Program, and let us hear from some of these young scholars.
By all means, by all means. So I'll just mention for everybody's reference point, in when we had the urban rebellion in Newark, 1967, the few students who were at African-American students who were at Seton Hall came back to the campus in the fall, and they caucused around what did that rebellion, mean for them. And out of those deliberations came 2 demands that the students put before the administration. They thought that more students, African-American students, should be recruited to Seton Hall, and that is from a broad spectrum from across the country. And they also thought that they wanted to learn more about themselves, so they asked for the development of a Black Studies program. Well, out of the first demand, eventually, those students, by the way, presented those demands in 1968. And for the next 2 years, those students marched and protested on this campus to get those 2 primary demands. In 1970, the Martin Luther King Scholarship was established. At that time, it was a full tuition scholarship to bring in from across the country the best and the brightest African-American students that could be found. And then similarly, Dr. George Jackson was brought in to design the Black Studies program. We have to mention these two things together because they are the fruits of the labor of that generation of students who were prophetically involved in a struggle on this campus. So we always give them honor for the time they put in. Today, the MLK program at the university is now, we call it a leadership program modeled after Dr. King's core values and his faith orientation. So we're looking to have our students, as always, as they come in, and we have scholars here literally from all over the world, I think involved in our constituency. We bring in 20 students a year. They receive a scholarship. These students, we hope, have the attitude of wanting to be involved and civically engaged in the surrounding communities. We hope that these scholars are ones who have a vision for some type of service that can be rendered to local schools, be it from elementary schools up to the high schools. On a periodic basis, we see to it that any surrounding elementary school from East Orange, Irvington, and the Orange, and then Oranges and Newark. If any teacher would like to bring their students up for a campus tour and to sit and meet and hear from the MLK scholars, that they can do that. We also have developed 2 academic components at the university that honor the legacy of Dr. King. Number one, all of the Martin Luther King scholars in their very first year at the campus, they must take the MLK Honors Seminar. This is something that was started back in the 1980s by a brother many of you may know, Leroy Wilson. In today's time, a former Martin Luther King scholar who will, many people in this program will know, Dr. Todd Burrows.
Yes.
Now the professor who handles the Martin Luther King Honors Seminar. In that seminar, my primary mandate to Dr. Burrows is that I want these students to know everything there is to know about resistance and struggle in this country, as it has been influenced by the civil rights movement and with a primary focus on Dr. King's works. So we've been blessed for a number of years now as Dr. Burrows is inspired to bring his best, and he gives those students a very, very, very thorough workout in his course. The second thing we have developed for many, many years on Dr. King's birthday, that is as celebrated on the federal calendar, that first Monday, we've had our little prayer breakfast kind of breakfasts on campus. We used to invite a lot of high school students up, community officials, local activists, and so forth. And at the end of the day, we would give the young people who were there from high schools a certificate that they had been involved with the MLK program at Seton Hall. After the election of 2016, that infamous election where we received the 45th POTUS with orange hair, we began to notice a lot of misplaced behavior on the campus. Many professors just began to literally felt that they were licensed and empowered to do anything they wanted to. So microaggressions began to increase on the campus. We even had many female students feeling as though they were being violated by that atmosphere. So at that point, I went to the university provost and asked for permission to convert our little prayer breakfast. I said, I think we need to begin to give people credit in understanding how to analyze racism and how to fundamentally, in Brother Kende's model, we need to be building anti-racist. So in January of 2019, we launched an all-day symposium called the Martin Luther King Day Symposium, in which we bring 10 or 15 professors in from the university to talk about everything from racism in the Bible, racism in the law, racism in education, racism in healthcare. We give the entire gamut. We were able to offer a 1 credit to undergraduate students. We have many graduate students sitting in. We have as many public school teachers sitting in. They also receive continuing education credits. Periodically, we'll bring in local authorities. As a matter of fact, in the year January 2020, we had Brother Hamm come up, and after we did the morning segment, we then took all of our students into a separate building and for an afternoon program. And Brother Chairman Hamm was the facilitator. We wanted to make sure they were getting exposure to first class analysis of Dr. King as a paradigm, and also understand what it means to be committed to a movement. So we're very, very proud of the fact that we have picked up the mantle laid down in the 1970s, and we've carried it into the 21st century. And we've, if you would, made sure that the mission in the 21st century complements where we as a people who look for liberation can go. The scholarship is open to any student whatsoever who has an interest in social justice. And we're pretty pleased with that whole piece. I might even add, some of our students have gone off campus and designed programs that would have gotten them well in excess of 100. To one young man even accomplished 300 hours of community service within one 12-month period. At that level, we were able to get a commendation given to him by the White House, just indicating his outstanding service. So we are pretty pleased with all of that. So I would also like to mention we have a number of students present, and I hope that we can probably just get them to either talk about the impact of the MLK program on themselves or how they would hope in the future to use any of this training. But we have maybe each of the students should introduce themselves and mention perhaps what your hometown is so that the audience can really get some appreciation. So I'd like to start with, well, I think we have two seniors here, Fatima and Donnie. So Fatima, if you could, if it's okay with the host, just take a few minutes.
Fatima should also, if you want to, spot, of course, update us on how you see things going on the campus in terms of the Battle for Africana Studies. You were here with us when you shared that out. You should certainly do that update. Good to have you back, granddaughter.
Sure. Well, at this point in time, we've been on we're in between semesters. Students have stepped away. The university has done a little bit of interviewing of some internal faculty, so they're looking to really have something we can put in front of the students who are putting the demands for it. But I would say on behalf of this faculty, the few of us who are here, we are all looking to do whatever we can do to see to it that there's a continuity in the academic experiences of all the students. So we'll do all we can do to make sure that as much of the program will remain holistic and together for the spring semester.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fatima Toure, and I'm a senior at Seton Hall University, senior political science and Africana studies.
Fatima, I'm sorry. I just want, because we want to hear everything that what the students have to say. If you're not speaking, please turn your mic off. Only person who is speaking, please let that be the only person with their mic on. Sorry, Fatima. Go ahead.
No problem. My name is Fatima Toure, senior political science and Africana studies major from Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I am the former vice president of the Martin Luther King Scholarship Association.
You can tell us more than that.
Sorry, I thought we were just going through like a round of introductions.
All right, let's do that. All right, let's let everybody introduce themselves, and we'll come back. Each of you talk about what the program has meant for you. Right, Fatima, you include an update on where you see the struggle for Africana studies going. So let's pass it off to your young brother Donnie.
Donnie, you're next. Donnie.
You're muted, son. He's having trouble with his sound.
I unmuted him. He's unmuted. Can he?
He's still okay.
He's still struggling.
Say testing.
Donnie, go out, come back in. Let's go to Gerald while you're doing that. Because I don't want y'all to lose time. So I want to get y'all in here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gerald Wesley. I'm a junior finance major at Seton Hall University, and I'm originally from Camden, New Jersey.
One of the toughest towns in the land. All right, son. Okay.
What's that behind your head, Gerald?
It's the New Jersey state flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's repping. He's repping.
I
So
see.
Fatima, why don't you just give us some of the highlights? And I think particularly, if you don't mind, among them, talk about your internships last summer, or just bring that connection with the Congressional Black Caucus to everyone's attention.
Sure. So this past summer, well, I'll say throughout my time at Seton Hall University, I've had the opportunity to intern with various different organizations related to the Black community. But most recently, this past summer, I had the opportunity to intern with the Congressional Black Caucus in the office of Congressman Donald Payne Jr. In his Washington, D.C. office as a congressional intern. And that was a really, really great experience, being able to be in Washington, D.C. And being able to be with the Congressional Caucus specifically. It was really, really great being able to meet other like-minded Black youth leaders who are working towards developing themselves in the Black community through policy change. And it wasn't only through policy change. I made so many great connections and friends through that organization, through the Congressional Black Caucus, that are lifelong connections, similar to the Martin Luther King Scholarship Association. So I was really, really grateful for that opportunity. But I'll say, like, while working specifically in Congressman Payne's office, I got to work on a lot of different legislation and policy work, like education, housing, some immigration, as well as transportation work. And all of those were really, really, really informative into what I want to do moving on in my career. So knowing that I definitely do want to work within politics, but working within a Black political space specifically.
Mm-hmm. So how has Dr. King influenced you in terms of what you're doing, in terms of your own studies of Dr. King?
So I'll say, like, just throughout just being an MLK scholar on Seton Hall's campus, the fact that Seton Hall is a PWI, a predominantly white institution, having organizations like the Martin Luther King Scholarship Association are really important on this campus. And essentially what we do with the MLKSA is we continue Dr. King's legacy of social justice and action by holding events and programs for our local college and surrounding communities. So it helps me by, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other scholars, by just providing the platform for me to develop myself as a scholar, as well as a leader and a community organizer. As vice president of the organization, I oversaw 19 committees, inclusive of fundraising, recruiting, and event planning. So it really does give you, like, the hard skills that you need to develop yourself, like, within your career, and also just as a successful member within your Black community, and prepares you to do the work that needs to be done.
Fatima, could you also just mention CAS for everybody's benefit, please?
Yes, so CAS is the Council of Africana Scholars on Seton Hall's campus. So essentially what we do with CAS is we work on trying to educate the college campus on what Africana Studies is, especially because a lot of students coming into Seton Hall, and students just in general, they don't believe that Africana Studies or Black Studies is something that they can make a career out of. So trying to change that narrative for our college campus and helping people understand that Africana Studies is an interdisciplinary major, and you can work in whatever field you want to work in and have an Africana Studies background. And it actually helps you because you are able to, you are informed on the Black community, and you are able to work within different sectors. So definitely that's what we do with CAS.
Thank you so much. I think Donnie, are you operational?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir. Just speak nice and loud. Go ahead.
That's
Tell
good.
us who you are and now and what your plans are, Donnie, and how has the MLK program and your interaction with it, how has it benefited you, and what are we doing with Black men on the campus?
Okay, perfect. So my name is Donnie Alvarez. Says I'm originally from Richmond, Virginia, and I would say that the program has impacted me the same thing as Fatima in the regards of the types of people you would meet. Like I said, I'm from Virginia, so when I came to New Jersey, I didn't really know anybody. This org kind of instantly gave me a family. Whether it was needed help with tutoring or just anything on campus, I always had somebody that I could turn to that has been through it and could help me. As far as Black men on campus, also a member of Black Men of Standard. So we're doing a lot to try to make the environment more inclusive and things like that. We recently had a meeting with the president, Dr. Nair, and so we're just trying to make him aware of the issues that are going on campus and the surrounding areas. I would say that the organization also impacted me in a way that's given me an opportunity to directly impact the community around Seton Hall. You know, coming up here, I didn't really know what was around it or what I was getting myself into, but through this organization, I've had the opportunity to kids come in and we help them with their goals and everything, and just kind of giving them that guidance and support that they may need, and seeing somebody who looks like them in these powerful positions sometimes can inspire them.
Donnie, were you ever involved with our Operation X?
So, COVID kind of messed it up for me a little bit, so I never really got an opportunity to actually go, but I did hear a lot
to
about
everybody what Operation X is.
To my understanding, it's a program where we would go into an elementary school and kind of like on a weekly basis and help them with tutoring or just life stuff, anything they would kind of need to try to help their growth. Or, I would even say, like, sometimes in our positions, we kind of take things for granted. So I think that going to these schools and helping these kids kind of sometimes grounds myself and, allows me to actually see the impact that I'm having on my surrounding community.
Thank you much. All right, Gerald.
Could I just ask a question? I wanted to ask Fatima real quick. Did you get to participate in the ALC at the CBC?
I unfortunately did not get a chance to participate because I had another conference to attend that weekend. But hopefully I can attend the next one. And I think it would be really great if some scholars and other Africana Studies majors could attend. But I definitely was looking forward to it, but I could not, unfortunately.
You could. It'll be next year. Okay. I just wanted to see. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Pritchett.
Not a problem. As a matter of fact, we would hope in the interim until the search is launched for the next director for the department, we hope that we might be able to get the Africana scholars. But an Africana scholar is going to be one of the students who is either majoring or minoring in Africana studies. But we'd like to get them out to the National Black Studies Council conference so that they can interact with and reinforce their goals with other students around the country who are majoring in Africana studies also. So Gerald, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your interactions with the program and various things you've done on and off campus, okay?
All right. So being on campus with the MLK Scholarship Program has kind of made me realize, it's kind of opened my eyes to more community-based things. And it's really helped me kind of expand my community service to the Newark and Oranges area. Even back home, I do a lot of community service down here. Every year, we feed the less fortunate for Thanksgiving. We feed them again in the summer. And even during high school and throughout my years coming up down here in South Jersey, there's not too many of us outside the city of Camden. So, kind of expanding out there and doing more outreach programs for Black people out there has also definitely been a staple of mine going into the program. And even being named after MLK is kind of personal to me because my great grandmother actually lived with Dr. Martin Luther King back in the 1950s as he was doing his first sit-in down here in Mount Laurel, I believe. No, it was Maple Shade, but yeah. So along with that, on campus, I'm also president of Black Men of Standard. So Donnie and I work very closely together to, be that hand for young Black men coming into Seton Hall and, helping them out professionally and academically.
All right. Are there any other activities on campus you're involved with?
Right now, I'm also a desk assistant for the Housing Residence Life, but I'm also involved with the fight for Africana Studies as well.
Excellent. Let's protect AFAM as best we can. All right. So we want to thank your scholars. I wonder if any of the Ed or Baba, if you have any other questions, we could or any other input you might like from us.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Donna. I'll follow you.
Dr. Pritchett, you said now who are my seniors on the panel?
Fatima and Donnie.
Okay. Hey, Gerald, what year are you in?
I'm a junior.
Okay, so all of y'all are pretty much on the okay. So this year coming up, do you in the community, do you have anything that you have identified that you want to participate with in local community in terms of giving back?
We had mentioned in our meeting not too long ago with Black Film Standard about trying to get our members more community service opportunities and things like that. There's an organization on campus called Dove that is called the Division of Volunteer Efforts, and they have a lot of opportunities that they post all the time about going to different areas and different soup kitchens and trying to help people. But in addition to that, we're planning an event for the spring, I think it is, like May or March, May, and we're trying to have it in Newark, Ivy Hill area because of everything that's going on. We think that it's a unique opportunity to be able to kind of bridge the gap between the water crisis issue in Newark and the university.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Now, the question I was going to ask is this. This is a fun question, and it's an intellectual question, right? And I was thinking back to my first year, my first semester at Rutgers Newark 1,000 years ago. I had a socialist English teacher, a closet socialist English teacher that made the mistake of giving us the letter from a Birmingham jail. Right. So I just wanted to ask each of you, and that's what really set me off in terms of Dr. King. Right. What is your favorite read from Dr. King? Right. You just heard your elder Lawrence Hamm tell you about where do we go from here. What is your favorite read of Dr. King?
I'll say that I'm sorry, Fatima, but our freshman year when we took the class with Professor Burroughs, we did have to read Where Do We Go From Here? And I thought that was a good book that captured kind of, what he stood for, and kind of, it's interesting to see the parallels between what happened back then and how it is now today, and kind of how we're kind of fighting the same battles in some regards. So that would be mine.
Yeah, I would also say, where do we go from here? From chaos to community. And I would say that was like a struggle for our class. Me and Donnie are in the same class. And I would say we really had a struggle with Dr. Burroughs and like trying to, at first we're like, no, this is a lot. But afterwards and getting through the class, we're like, yeah, this is a class that we definitely all needed and a book that we all appreciated and enjoyed. But it was definitely a struggle, that course, but it was definitely well worth it and appreciated.
I might help to interpret the word a struggle. What that really means is that Dr. Burroughs' instructions.
I was working their behinds,
yeah, is to drop the whole kitchen sink into that course. And my philosophy is perspiration leads to inspiration.
Yes,
so
sir.
He makes them perspire. But they will know. Hopefully, we expose them to the A to Z of civil rights history in the country.
I think for me, what I want to say is that I'm extremely proud of all of y'all, and I'm sitting here, my heart is just so full, not only for I know y'all call him Dr. Pritchett. He's always our professor. Professor Pritchett continuing to do the work, of sowing into young people's lives like he did us, and just hearing you guys, man, just all I can say is all politics are local. Anytime you guys want to come by here, hang out with us, and add some of the wisdom you all got to some of the old wisdom we got, we can struggle together and push forward to make things happen. So this platform is here. Anytime you guys want to come by, do that. But I was wondering if I could get Larry to share something that I heard today. Larry, you could share with them. I heard today that Mayor Baraka was talking about when Dr. King came to Newark, and somebody said Larry Hamm was there. He was at one of those meetings when he was a young man. And
some kids put me there today too. I said, no, I wasn't there.
Yeah. So I wondered, Larry, could you share some of that with these young people and us?
Man, I don't know who perpetrating them lies.
Like who did Larry? You know what I mean?
I was in 1967. Dr. King, in March 27th, 1967, Dr. King was at Abyssinian Baptist Church. Dr. King visited Jersey frequently. He visited to preach, and he also visited to raise money. And as the young brother Gerald pointed out, he was correct that Dr. King did participate in a civil rights action. I believe he was still a student at that time down there in Camden. And if people want to reference this, if you just Google Dr. King in Camden, there's been a number of articles written about this, and they actually show the house, I think, where Dr. King stayed when he was in Camden.
Yes.
So he came to Jersey frequently. He preached in Newark, he preached in Patterson, he preached in Jersey City. But March 27th, literally 1 week before he was assassinated, he came and spoke at Abyssinian Baptist Church. And that's a church that historically the People's Organization for Progress met at. And you know, it was an overwhelming turnout. Everybody that wanted to come couldn't get into church. The streets was packed, you know, but it was quite an event. But it was 1 week before he was killed. So you know, I just want to urge the students, don't be mad at your professors. I want to commend, first of all, Dr. Pritchett for carrying this torch for more than half a century.
That's right.
For holding up the banner of Black Studies at Seton Hall University. Against all odds, I personally know of efforts to undermine you, to try to end the program, but you have stood your ground. You've taken some hits, but you have persevered. And someone that you talked to today said they didn't know you were as militant as you are. You know, you have that professorial demeanor, but this person that I talked to today, they said, boy, he said some things I don't even know if I could print.
It's the spook who sat by the door.
That's right. That's right. But I just want to say Dr. King wrote at least 5 books: Measure of a Man, Stride Toward Freedom, Strength to Love, Why We Can't Wait, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community, and Trumpet of Conscience. And of course, I would urge people to try to read those books. You can't read them all at one time, but if you read one a year, you'd be doing pretty good. It's a shame that a number of African American studies programs do not require the reading of Dr. King's works. Now, this is a shame. I know I'm speaking from experience as a college graduate, a graduate of Prince University, who was in the politics department and in the African American Studies program. Nothing that Dr. King wrote was required. It was on the recommended reading list. And this is an abomination. How can you have first of all, Black Studies programs exist because of the Civil Rights Movement. There was no Black Studies program prior to 1966. I think the first one was at San Francisco State in 1966. The movement gave birth to the struggle for Black Studies, and the Black Power movement was a dynamo for the establishment of Black Studies programs. So to have a Black Studies program that doesn't actually have the words that Dr. King wrote and said, and Malcolm X wrote and said, and W.E.B. Du Bois wrote and said, and Marcus Garvey, and on and on and on, you know, does not do the maximum service that is needed for the Black community. And, you know, we got a lot of books that written by people who wrote about Dr. King. Some of them wasn't even in the civil rights movement. Some of them were, but some of them wasn't even in the civil rights movement. So I urge people to read what Dr. King said. The other thing I was going to say, and it goes back to something Zaid said earlier, was that we should also give respect to Coretta Scott King, not simply because she was the wife of Martin Luther King, but because she was a leader and an intellectual and an activist in her own right.
Absolutely.
In some respects, she pushed Dr. King
Absolutely
to take positions that he took, particularly on the war in Vietnam. Coretta Scott King had come out before the war, before Dr. King did. And the other thing I want to say is that Coretta Scott King honorably upheld the legacy of Martin Luther King. You know, it could have been different. Dr. King was a man. He was not a god. And he was a man who made some mistakes. And some of those mistakes, you know, could have had his wife been another type of woman, could have been disastrous, not only for Dr. King personally, but for the movement.
Absolutely.
Because she was the wife.
Absolutely.
And if, you know, if they had gotten
into cocaine right at their marriage.
That's right. You know, so I take my hat off. You know, Ed, and one day, Ed, you got to tell people all about your Golden Gloves boxing career, because you are a great athlete in your own right. I didn't meet Dr. King, but I did meet Coretta Scott King. After I was appointed to the Board of Education at the age of 17, I received the Southern Christian Leadership Conference Youth Leadership Award in 1971. They flew me down to the to New Orleans, to the Roosevelt Hotel where the conference was being held. And there I met Coretta Scott King. I met Dr. Ralph Abernathy. I met Hosea Williams. I met Andrew Young. I met Jesse Jackson. I met all of them. And the night that I received the award, they didn't even, and you know, it took me years.
Chairman,
to
this
really
is gonna have to be like a good sequel to be continued, because it's after 9 o'clock.
I'm sorry.
So
I'll
hold that
stop there.
thought. I just want you to hold that thought. So everybody's like, what was he gonna say next? Come back next week.
All right.
You'll know.
We leave it there.
Okay. But but one of the things that I do want you to do is, Dr. Pritchett, have them to invite Assemblyman Payne, Bill Payne,
Yes.
Payne, who has a memory and he actually was a youth when Dr. King was coming back and forth to New Jersey, and he can tell you a lot of stories.
Oh yeah.
Verbatim.
Sister Donna, I don't know how many people know this, but his brother Donald was a Seton Hall graduate.
His papers are at Seton Hall. That's right.
Yep. And let me squeeze in one other comment, and I'm pardon for, but everybody needs to hear this. When students attend our MLK Day Symposium, we have them read 2 books. They must pick one of Dr. King's books and do a complete analysis for me. And the second book they must read is Dr. Cornel West, The Radical King. So I want the students to understand King in his historical context. And then our most preeminent scholar of the 21st century doing that analysis. So I want everybody to hear that so you understand the thoroughness in which we attack this. Yeah.
Right on.
Well, we appreciate you being here. No better way on this weekend to close the show. And Fatima, we're going to ask you to save the date for the first Friday in February, and we'll reach out to you. But if you would just do us the honor of saving the date for the first Friday in February from 6 to 9, and we'll tell you why later, okay? Ed?
Thank you. I will do that.
Oh, well, let me just, young people, we're over, so you got to answer this question quick. Donnie left, but we ask every time we have we have guests on the show. This is a political talk show, but it's a hip hop political talk show. So we ask you this question. We ask everybody this one question. What hip hop artist do you listen to, individual or group, that inspires you? So when you're going to write a paper, or when you're going to go out and speak or do community work, Fatima, we'll start with you. What hip hop artist or individual or group inspires you?
The last time I was on, I think I said Kendrick Lamar. So
yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Yes,
you did. We got you on tape saying that.
Okay.
So this time, I think I'll say Nicki Minaj. And I say Nicki because there's not a lot of, female rappers in the industry, and she has been, in the game for a long time. And I know there with, more recent celebrities and artists coming up, there's like a lot of battle of who's the queen of rap. And respectfully, Nicki got it.
All right, we gotta tell Queen that Queen Latifah is looking for the queen of rap. Go ahead, Gerald.
I personally, I don't really listen to modern rap, so I'm gonna have to go with Mobb Deep.
Okay. All right. Our DJ would love to hear that. So thank you.
Gerald is like Mayor Baraka. Mayor Baraka only listens to classic hip hop.
Classic hip hop.
Yeah.
So
you ask Mayor what's new, he'd be like, "No, I got to go back."
Got to go deep. Real deep. In fact, Mobb Deep. Okay. So we're going to turn it over to our executive producer, Gerald. I'm sorry, Gerald. Look, I might be speaking something. And
well, listen, we definitely want to take the time to thank, obviously these young people that thought not at robbery to come here and share, their thoughts with us and spend time with us. We appreciate that. And of course, we can't thank, Professor Pritchett enough. I mean, love doesn't even begin to say thank you to Pritchett for what he sowed in my life and all of my friends' lives over the last 30-some years up at Seton Hall.
Talk, alumni, talk.
And good to see that God decided to keep him around so that he can continue to do that with other young people. And
yeah,
so,
you got to take that magazine and show them students. That magazine looks like it was fire.
Oh yeah,
you remember.
So and again, every time they tried to put us out of there, Pritchett and Sells stepped up to make sure that we stayed on that campus to do what we needed to do.
We had your back. We had your back.
And so we thank Pritchett for that, and we thank these young people, and we want to thank all of the folks who came by today. I mean, so why don't you go ahead down there?
We have been going nonstop with the information, a show packed with great information from the onset with Jiles Ship, followed up from Trustee Brown, and then we went right into the next hour with the vote, and then we're closing out with the future. So thank you for being here, and we ask that you come in. And Fatima, I'm gonna tell you to write that down again. Save the date, the first Friday of February. We will be telling you why soon. Hey, Principal Cafele is giving you guys a shout out. You see that, Dr. Pritchett? He give you a shout out, Principal Cafele.
Your daughter will shout you out, Dr. Pritchett.
Yes.
Let me announce another MLK program very quickly. Ironbound Community Corporation, and then Larry's going to be one of the speakers. 2:00 on Monday at St. Stephen's Church, right? Some community-based Black and Brown Joy. Young folks are pulling together a beautiful MLK program. ICC does good MLK programs. Deborah Smith Gregory is going to speak. I'll be there, right? And some fascinating young folks doing some work in the Ironbound on the environmental justice front, doing some very good work. So look forward to that.
So did we thank all of the guests, Donna?
Yes, we did. Chairman, do you have any announcement?
Sunday.
Yeah, we announced it already. Please come Sunday to the march. I hope the students will spread the word and get some young people there. And if y'all come, you'll certainly have an opportunity to speak. We want to hear from the young people of the 21st century. we some of us still live in the 20th century, but we got to catch up. We got to hear from the 21st century now.
Too,
Well, listen, again, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming through, and thank you to my co-host, to Brother Zaid, and thank you to Donna, and of course, John Austin is out with his students, as you all know, and we thank our emeritus partner, Bashir Akinyele Muhammad, who's not here, but of course, all of us are, part of what you get. Right? All politics are local. So we thank you. We'll see you next week at the same time, same place, same web address. You can catch us there giving more information. And next week is the Mayor's Forum, right?
Yes, yes.
Next week,
right.
our beloved brother, Mayor Raz J. Baraka from the great city.
And if we're gonna be late, let me shout out Man Barack, because they were shouting him out all over the radio about the work he is doing. So thank you, Man Barack. I heard his name in different places.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. So and I'll tell you some more, Larry, what the mayor was saying, how old you are.
I'm 69. I'm 69.
And 69, and who just ran 25 laps, right? 25?
Larry
40.
Larry's
40.
been everywhere, you know.
Wow.
The great Adimu Chunga, right?
That's right.
Thank y'all. We'll see y'all next week. All right, y'all.
All right. Good night.
All right. Don't stop.